The maître at Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant looked Reese Langford directly in the eye and said the two words she'd never heard in her entire billion-dollar career. No tables. Behind him, families clinkered champagne glasses and laughed like they'd never known loneliness. While Reese stood frozen in her Valentino coat, realizing that all her power couldn't buy her a single seat on New Year's Eve. She turned toward the exit, bracing for another midnight alone in her penthouse prison, when a 6-year-old girl with wild curls and a purple sparkly dress pointed across a crowded restaurant and said the thing no board member ever dared. "Daddy, that lady is all alone. We have to save her. Before we begin, I'd love for you to join me on this journey. If this story resonates with you, please hit the like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I can't wait to see how far this story travels across the world." The reservation confirmation sat in Reese Langford's inbox like a contract signed in blood. She'd made it 6 months ago from a boardroom in Tokyo. Her signature still wet on an acquisition deal worth $40 million while her assistant text glowed on her phone screen. Oral confirmed. 9:08 p.m. table for one. She'd barely glanced at it before returning to the presentation, to the nervous executives bowing as they surrendered their company to her verdict. Now she stood in Oral's marble entryway on New Year's Eve, and a maitre d', a man half her age in a suit that costs less than her shoes, was explaining why her reservation didn't exist. "I apologize for the inconvenience, Ms. Langford." His voice had that particular smoothness people used when delivering catastrophic news to powerful individuals. Regretful but firm, sympathetic but unmoved. "We've experienced a system error. Unfortunately, we have no available tables this evening." Reese didn't blink. In negotiations, the first person to blink was the first person to lose. "I have a confirmation number." Of course, he gestured vaguely toward the dining room, where every table blazed with candlelight and laughter, where couples leaned close and families raised glasses and groups of friends were already drunk on proximity and champagne. "As you can see, we're at capacity. New Year's Eve is our busiest. I reserved this table in June." Each word dropped like ice into water before anyone in that room knew they wanted to be here tonight. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. He knew who she was. Everyone in Manhattan's stratosphere knew Reese Langford, the woman who turned venture capital into blood sport, the CEO who could make billion-dollar companies bleed profit or bleed out entirely. Forbes had called her the executioner in their most recent profile, right above the photo of her in the boardroom where she'd just dismantled a family business that had stood for 3 generations. None of it mattered to the leather reservation book in front of him. "I understand your frustration," the phrase people used when they understood nothing at all. "I'd be happy to recommend several excellent alternatives." "I don't want alternatives." Reese's voice could have frozen the champagne in every glass behind him. "I want what I paid for." They stood in silent combat. Around them, Manhattan's elite celebrated in the kind of excess that only came from never being told no. Through the archway, Ree could see it all, the life she deliberately avoided while building her empire. Couples feeding each other dessert. Children being indulged by grandparents. Friends toasting decades of history. People who chosen connection over conquest and somehow looked happier for it. The maître's expression never changed. "I'm afraid that simply isn't possible tonight." The words landed like a verdict. Final. Irreversible. For the first time in her adult life, Reese Langford's money couldn't fix something. Her power had found its limit in a reservation book, and a man who didn't care that her net worth exceeded the GDP of small nations. She turned without another word. Dignity was the only currency left. The December wind hit her like punishment the moment she stepped outside.
The flight attendant tried to block him, but the woman stepped forward, flashing something from her leather bag. A badge, official, unmistakable. "It's fine," she told the attendant calmly. "Let him through." Inside the cockpit, alarms blinked in angry red patterns. The captain looked pale. "We've got no power, no restart," he said. "They're asking for a call sign like we're military."
Laughing too loud,
"They think
already
I'm
stumbling
here,"
toward
Ethan
midnight.
replied. The captain
Couples
stared.
walked hand in hand,
"Are you?"
their fingers intertwined
Ethan
with the
reached for the
casual
radio.
intimacy
His
of
hand
people who
trembled
never had
once,
to eat
only
alone.
once.
A family
"This is
rushed
Ghost
past,
7,
the
he said
father
into the
carrying
mic,
a sleeping
voice steady
toddler,
and
the
clear.
mother juggling bags
Repeat,
full of
Ghost
noisemakers
7
and
aboard
champagne.
civilian flight
Both of them
214,
hurried and
requesting
happy,
glide vector.
and together in a way that
There was a
made Reese's
pause,
chest
then
tighten.
relief flooded
Her
the
phone
frequency.
vibrated. She pulled it out, expecting her
copies.
assistant with
We'll
some
guide you in.
emergency that needed immediate
The woman
attention.
stood quietly behind him,
Some
arms
fire only
folded,
she could
as if she had
extinguish.
expected this all
Instead,
along.
3 words from her
You
brother
knew,
Marcus
he said
appeared
without
on the
turning.
screen like an
I
indictment.
work with the Federal
Happy
Aviation
New Year,
Administration, she
stranger,
replied.
stranger.
When both engines
That's
went
what
out
she'd become to
simultaneously,
her own
we
blood.
flagged it as
The
more than
sister who'd
mechanical.
missed his wedding
We
for a deal
cross-checked
in
the passenger
Singapore.
manifest.
Who'd sent
Your name
expensive
triggered
gifts
a file.
instead of showing up for his
Why would the
children's births.
FAA have my file?
Who'd stopped
She
answering calls
hesitated,
somewhere
then
around the
answered
3rd or
honestly.
4th time he
Because
tried to
you
have a
once
real
saved a
conversation
city
and
by
she'd
landing where
interrupted
no
for
one
a
thought you
conference
could.
call.
He
Reese
remembered
stared
that
at those
day,
3
the
words
crippled
until
jet,
they
the
blurred.
impossible
She
runway,
typed, "I'm
the way
sorry."
his wife had
Then
smiled at him
deleted it.
afterward and
Typed,
said,
"Can we talk?"
"You always come
Then
home."
deleted that, too.
He guided the
What could
powerless
she
aircraft
possibly
through the
say?
sky,
That she'd been
listening as the
building
fighter
something that
pilots
mattered
relayed
more than
headings and
family
descent
dinners.
angles.
That she'd
It was not
always
so
meant to
different
call
from
back,
before.
to visit, to
Fear
be
still
present for
whispered,
moments
but
that
training
couldn't be
spoke louder.
rescheduled around quarterly
Outside the
earnings.
window, the runway
She
appeared like
pocketed
a
the
thin
phone
gray
without
thread.
responding and kept walking.
Speed's dropping, the
3
captain
blocks
warned.
later, muscle
Hold it,
memory,
Ethan
more than
murmured.
intention,
The
brought her
cabin was
to another
silent now.
restaurant.
Even Lily had
This one
stopped
was
crying.
smaller,
The
humbler,
wheels
checkered
touched hard,
tablecloths
the
instead
plane
of
skidded,
imported linens,
shuddered,
a handwritten
metal
menu
protesting
taped to the
against
window.
asphalt. For a
Through the
terrible
glass,
second,
she could
Ethan
see it
thought
was
they would
packed
veer
with
off.
people who'd
Then they
probably called
stopped.
yesterday, not 6
Stillness,
months ago.
no flames, no
People
smoke,
who came here
just
because they
breathing.
knew the owner's
The
name,
cockpit
because the food
erupted in
reminded them of
exhalations and
childhood, because
disbelieving
some
laughter.
things mattered more than
Ethan stepped
exclusivity.
back from the controls.
Reese's
When
hand
he
was on the
returned
door
to row
before
8,
her brain
Lily
caught up
launched
to her
herself
body.
into his arms.
Warmth
"You
and
fixed
noise
it,"
crashed
she
over her
whispered.
the moment
He
she
held her
stepped
tightly.
inside.
"We
Laughter
fixed
and
it."
conversation and the
The woman
beautiful
stood in the
chaos of a
aisle, gathering
successful
her bag.
restaurant at full
"Who
capacity.
are you?" he
A
asked.
young hostess
She considered him for a
materialized in
moment.
front of her, hair
"Someone who
escaping from
knew
a
the
messy
sky
bun.
wasn't finished with you," she
Marinara
said
sauce
gently.
splattered across
He
her
noticed
apron like
something
battle
then.
scars.
A small silver
"Hi, do
pin
you
on
have
her
a
lapel,
reservation?"
a pair
The
of
question
wings,
almost made
military
Ree
issue.
laugh. No,
"You
the
weren't
girl's
just
face fell
FAA,"
with
he
genuine
said.
regret.
"No,"
"Oh man,
she
I'm
admitted.
so sorry.
"I flew
We're
search and
completely
rescue.
booked.
We
I've
once
got a wait
scrambled to
list,"
find a
but
downed
honestly,
jet with
she
the
lowered
call
her
sign
voice
Ghost 7.
conspiratorially.
You got
"It's
yourself
at
home
least 2
before we
hours
could
and
reach
that's
you."
if people actually
Their
leave,"
eyes
which
held.
on New Year's Eve,
"You gave
she
a lot,"
trailed off
she
with an
continued
apologetic
softly.
shrug.
"Today, you took something
I
back."
understand.
Boarding
Reese started
stairs
to turn
rolled toward
away,
the
then
plane.
paused.
Emergency crews
Something made
waited
her
below.
ask, "Is it
The
always
world
this
resumed
busy?"
its noise.
"Most nights,
As she
yeah."
stepped toward the
Pride lit
exit,
up
she
the hostess's
paused.
face.
"Row
"We're
8
family
suited
now,
you," she
3
said with a faint
generations.
smile.
My
"But you
Nona's
don't
in the
have to
kitchen
stay
right
quiet
now.
forever."
She's been cooking
Then she
here
was
for
gone.
40 years.
Ethan looked
People
at
come
Lily,
for the
at the
atmosphere as
sunlight
much as
spilling
the
across
food.
the cabin,
She leaned
at the
closer.
ordinary
"Between
miracle
you
of
and
being
me, her
alive.
carbonara
For
is the
years, he had
best in
believed the most
Manhattan, but
important chapter
we're
of his
already
life
too
ended with
popular."
loss.
Despite
But as the
everything,
doors
the
opened
rejection
and
at
fresh
oral,
air
the
rushed
cold
in,
gnawing at
he
her
realized
bones, the
something
overwhelming
simple and
loneliness of
startling.
standing in a
The
warm
sky
place
had
full of
asked for
people
his
who belong
name,
there.
and he had answered.
Reese smiled. "Your secret's safe." She was halfway to the door when a child's voice cut through the ambient noise like a bell. "Daddy, look, that lady doesn't have anyone." Everything stopped. The universe contracted to that single observation, spoken with the devastating honesty only children possessed. Reese turned slowly, tracking the voice to its source. A little girl, maybe 6, maybe 7, stood on her chair, one small finger pointed directly at Ree. She had wild dark curls pulled into 2 puffs that defied gravity. And she wore a purple dress that sparkled under the restaurant lights like she'd dressed for a ball, not a neighborhood Italian joint. Her expression was pure concern, as if Reese being alone was a problem that needed immediate solving. "Lily Rose Brooks, sit down this instant." The man beside her spoke quietly, but his voice carried the particular authority of a parent who'd learned when volume mattered and when it didn't. "That's not polite, but it's true." Lily sat, but her eyes never left Ree. "She's all alone on New Year's Eve. That's the saddest thing I've ever seen." The man, clearly her father, looked up, and Ree felt the full weight of his gaze. He was younger than her, mid-30s maybe, with the kind of tired eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights, and shoulders that had carried weight they shouldn't have to. He wore a flannel shirt under a worn jacket, and there was sawdust still caught in his dark hair, like he'd come straight from work and hadn't bothered to check a mirror. "I'm so sorry," he called over to Ree. His voice was gentle, careful, like he was approaching a wounded animal. "She's 6. The filter's still in development. Actually, I'm starting to think it might never develop." "I have a filter," Lily protested. "I'm just choosing not to use it right now because this is an emergency." Reese should have left, should have walked out into the cold and back to her empty penthouse and the life she deliberately constructed to avoid exactly this kind of messy human interaction. Should have pretended she hadn't heard a 6-year-old diagnose her loneliness with surgical precision. Instead, she stood frozen, watching the stranger try to teach his daughter about boundaries while the entire restaurant pretended not to listen to every word. Lily wasn't finished. She grabbed her father's sleeve and whispered something Ree couldn't hear, but she could read the urgency in the child's body language. The insistence in how she tugged his arm. The father shook his head. Lily whispered again, more forcefully. A silent negotiation unfolded between them, eyebrows raised, subtle headshakes, the shorthand that only existed between people who knew each other's souls. Finally, the man sighed. It was the sigh of someone who'd learned that arguing with his daughter was a war he'd never win. He stood up and every eye in the restaurant tracked his movement. He walked toward Ree and up close she could see everything her first glance had missed. The laugh lines around his eyes that spoke of a man who'd chosen joy despite having every reason not to. The calluses on his hands that many worked with them, created with them, the silver threading through his temples that made him look distinguished rather than old. The wedding ring he wasn't wearing but should have been based on the pale line of skin on his left hand. "This is going to sound insane," he said when he reached her. "And it absolutely is insane. I want to be clear about that up front." He ran a hand through his hair, dislodging more sawdust. "But my daughter is convinced that you shouldn't eat alone on New Year's Eve, and I've learned through painful trial and error that arguing with her is a losing battle." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "Would you like to join us for dinner? No pressure. I know this is weird. We're definitely weird, but the invitation is genuine." Reese stared at him at the stranger offering her a seat at his table based on nothing more than his daughter's conviction that loneliness was something that could be fixed with marinara sauce and company. Every instinct she'd honed over 3 decades in business screamed at her to decline to maintain the walls that had kept her safe and successful and completely devastatingly alone. "I don't know your names," she heard herself say. "Mateo Brooks." He extended his hand. His grip was warm, strong, real in a way that boardroom handshakes never were. "That's my daughter, Lily. She's 6. She has opinions about literally everything and she makes friends faster than I can apologize for her." His smile was tired and genuine. "Fair warning, you can sit next to me," Lily shouted from the table, waving with enough enthusiasm to knock over a water glass. Her father caught it without looking, the reflexes of someone who'd been preventing disasters for years. "I'm drawing, and I can show you my castle, and you can tell me why you're so sad." Mateo closed his eyes briefly, and she has zero sense of appropriate conversation topics. Ree looked at the little girl, at her father, at the table where half-finished kids' menu drawings in a basket of bread represented something she hadn't experienced since before she learned that emotions were liabilities, spontaneous human connection with no ulterior motive. "Ree," she said finally, "Ree Langford." If Mateo recognized her name, his expression didn't change. No calculating gleam in his eye, no sudden shift in posture that meant he was recategorizing her from stranger to opportunity. Just that same tired, genuine smile as he gestured toward the table. "Well, Reese Langford, welcome to our extremely informal New Year's Eve dinner. Fair warning number 2. Lily ordered enough spaghetti to feed a small army, and she will absolutely try to share it with you, whether you want her to or not." Reese followed him back to the table, acutely aware of every eye in the restaurant, tracking her movement. She could feel the weight of her choices settling around her like her expensive coat, every dinner eaten alone at her desk, every holiday spent reviewing acquisition targets, every moment she'd convinced herself didn't matter because she was building something important. She'd built an empire. And somewhere along the way, she'd forgotten to build a life. Lily beamed at her as she sat down, a smile so bright it should have required sunglasses. "What's your favorite color?" Reese carefully placed her purse on the floor, buying herself time. "Excuse me, your favorite color?" Lily enunciated each word slowly, like she was speaking to someone who might not understand English. "It's a simple question. Mine's purple, obviously." She gestured at her sparkling dress. "And Daddy's is blue, but not baby blue, dark blue, navy, the color of the ocean when it's deep." "What's yours?" Reese realized with a small shock of recognition that she didn't know. Couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked her about something so fundamentally divorced from her net worth or business acumen. "Gray, I suppose." Lily's nose wrinkled like she'd smelled something unpleasant. "Gray isn't a real favorite color. Gray is what you say when you don't actually have an answer. When you don't want to think about what you really like." "Lily." Mateo's voice held gentle warning, but there was amusement underneath it. "It's true, Daddy." Lily picked up a red crayon and started coloring with aggressive certainty. "Gray is the color of nothing, of not choosing, of not caring." She looked up at Ree with eyes far too knowing for a 6-year-old. Maybe you should think about it more. Really think. And tell me later when you remember what you actually like instead of what's safe." The observation landed with uncomfortable accuracy. Reese sat across from this tiny human in a purple dress and couldn't find a single counterargument. "She's not usually this intense with strangers," Matteo said, though his expression suggested this was a lie. "Yes, I am," Lily corrected without looking up. "Mrs. Patterson says I have boundary issues. But Mrs. Patterson also wears the same sweater every single day, so her judgment is questionable." Despite everything, the absurdity of the situation, the discomfort of being psychoanalyzed by a first grader, the strangeness of sitting at a stranger's table, Reese felt something unexpected crack open in her chest. A laugh, small, rusty from disuse, but genuine. "What are you drawing?" she asked, leaning slightly toward Lily's commandeered menu. Lily held it up with pride. The structure in question looked more like a series of violent triangles having a disagreement, but Reese could see the intention. Turrets, a drawbridge, windows, flags, a castle for a princess, but not a boring princess who waits around to be rescued. A princess who fights dragons and doesn't need anyone to save her. "Why does she need a castle if she can fight dragons?" Rhea asked before she could stop herself. Lily looked at her like she'd asked why the sky existed. "Because everyone needs somewhere safe to come home to. Even if you're the strongest person in the world, especially if you're the strongest person in the world." She returned to her coloring, adding what might have been a mote or possibly just an aggressive scribble. "Daddy says that's why we moved to New York, so we could find our castle again, our safe place." The words hung in the air like smoke. Matteo's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and Reese saw him take a deliberate breath, the kind that meant he was pushing something painful back down where it belonged. "We moved here about 6 months ago," he said, his voice determinedly casual. "From Portland, Oregon, not Maine. Fresh start. New city, new apartment, new school for Lily." Reese recognized the tone. She used it in board meetings when discussing companies she'd had to shut down, people she'd had to fire. Clinical, controlled, the voice of someone who'd learned that emotion was dangerous. "Why the fresh start?" she asked, then immediately wondered if she'd overstepped. These weren't her people. This wasn't her business. Matteo studied her for a moment, and Rhea had the unsettling feeling he could see straight through her designer armor to the lonely woman underneath. "Lily's mum died 18 months ago. Ovarian cancer, stage 4 by the time they caught it." He said it simply without drama or bid for sympathy. "Just facts. This is what happened. This is why we're here. We needed distance from the memories, from the life we'd built together." Everything in Portland was a reminder of her. The grocery store where she liked to buy flowers. The park where we'd have picnics, the hospital where he trailed off then found his thread again. "So we left, started over somewhere we could breathe without drowning." "Mommy had yellow hair," Lily announced, still coloring but clearly listening to every word, "like sunshine. And she smelled like lemons and lavender. And she sang in the car even when the radio was off. And she always burned the cookies, but we ate them anyway because that made her happy." She looked up at Rhea and her expression was suddenly fierce, defiant. "I remember everything about her. Every single thing. Daddy thinks I might forget because I'm little, but I won't. I'm going to remember forever." Matteo reached over and squeezed his daughter's hand, and the gesture was so full of love and pain and pride that Rhea had to look away. "I know you will, sweetheart," he said softly. Rhea felt something crack wider in her chest, a fissure in the armor she'd spent decades welding into place. She looked at this little girl who'd lost her mother but still had the courage to invite lonely strangers to dinner. At this father who was holding his family together with determination and sawdust and love, and realized she was witnessing something she'd spent her entire adult life avoiding. Genuine, messy, beautiful human connection. Their food arrived in a cascade of plates and heavenly smells. Lily's spaghetti came on a platter designed for sharing with meatballs the size of baseballs. Matteo had ordered chicken parmesan that looked like someone's grandmother had made it with love. The server turned to Rhea expectantly. "I don't have a menu," Rhea said. "Oh." The server looked flustered. "I can grab you. She'll have what I'm having." Matteo interrupted smoothly, "And whatever wine pairs best. The ladies had a rough evening." The server nodded and disappeared. Reese looked at Matteo somewhere between grateful and irritated that he'd made the decision for her. "How do you know I'm not vegan or allergic to chicken? You're wearing leather boots and a wool coat." His grin was unrepentant. And you don't look like someone who lets food dictate their life. You look like someone who makes decisions and commits to them. Consequences be damned. You got all that from watching me walk across a restaurant. I'm observant. Mateo poured water into her glass from the carafe on the table. Also, Lily pointed at you specifically because, and I quote, you look powerful and sad. She's 6, but she's rarely wrong about people. I'm not sad, Reese said automatically. Okay. Mateo didn't argue, didn't push, didn't try to convince her, just accepted her statement and moved on like it didn't matter whether it was true or not. What do you do, Ree, for work? For the first time in her adult life, Ree considered lying. Telling him she was an accountant, a teacher, a barista, anything other than what she actually was. Something that wouldn't change how he looked at her, wouldn't introduce the calculation that always crept into people's eyes when they learned what she was worth. Venture capital, she said finally, defaulting to the vague truth. I acquire companies and restructure them, make them profitable. Mateo nodded like she'd told him she worked in retail. Sounds intense. It is. Reese watched Lily attack her spaghetti with the kind of wholehearted enthusiasm only children could muster. What about you? I'm a carpenter. He said it without apology or inflation. Custom furniture, mostly some restoration work when I can get it. I've got a tiny shop in Brooklyn that barely covers rent, but I'm my own boss and I get to pick Lily up from school every day, so he shrugged. Worth it. Reese thought about her own schedule. Meetings from 6:30 in the morning until 9 at night. Dinner eaten standing up at her office window. Emails answered at 2 o'clock in the morning because sleep was for people with less ambition. She couldn't remember the last time she'd left work because she wanted to, rather than because she'd exhausted every task that couldn't wait until tomorrow. That sounds nice, she said quietly. It is. Mateo twirled his fork in his pasta. Most days, other days it's terrifying watching the bank account shrink while Lily needs new shoes and the rent's due, and I'm gambling everything on people actually wanting handmade furniture in the age of IKEA and Amazon. He met her eyes and she saw the truth in them. But yeah, most days it's nice. Most days I remember why I chose this over the corporate job that would pay 3 times as much but require me to miss bedtime. Daddy makes the most beautiful things in the whole world, Lily interjected, spaghetti sauce decorating her chin like war paint. He made my bed. It has flowers carved into it. Real ones, not fake-looking ones, roses and daisies and one big sunflower because those were Mommy's favorites. That does sound beautiful, Reese said. It is. Lily nodded. Seriously. When I'm sad and I can't sleep, I trace the flowers with my fingers in the dark. And I remember that Daddy can still make beautiful things even when he's sad. That's important. Making beautiful things when you're sad. It means the sadness doesn't win. Mateo's expression flickered. Love and pain and pride, all mixing together in a way that made Reese's throat tighten. Eat your dinner, philosopher. The wine arrived, and Ree took a long drink, needing the warmth spreading through her chest. Around them, the restaurant hummed with life. She could hear fragments of other conversations, someone's proposal story, a debate about the best spot for fireworks, a grandmother teaching her grandson Italian phrases. All these people connected by invisible threads of shared history and love and simple proximity. Do you have family here? Mateo asked casually, refilling her wine glass without asking if she wanted more. In the city, someone you'll be with at midnight. The question was innocent, just making conversation. But Reese felt it land in her chest like a stone. She thought of Marcus' text. Happy New Year, stranger. Thought of her penthouse with its museum-quality emptiness. Thought of every midnight she'd spent alone telling herself it was a choice, a preference, a badge of honor. No, she said. The word came out smaller than intended. No one. Mateo's expression shifted. Not pity, which she would have hated. Something gentler, understanding, maybe recognition. Well, you've got us now, if you want. We're planning to watch the fireworks from the Brooklyn Bridge. Lily's never seen them in person, and I figure if we're doing New York, we should do it right. There will be so many people. Lily's eyes went wide with excitement. Daddy says maybe millions all watching the same sky at the exact same time. That's magic, don't you think? Everyone looking up together, all wishing for the same thing, for the new year to be better than the old one. Reese thought about all the New Year's Eve she'd spent working through midnight, barely noticing the fireworks outside her penthouse windows. All the moments she'd let pass because she was too busy building her empire to notice the world celebrating around her. That does sound magical, she heard herself say. Lily beamed. Then you should come. You absolutely cannot be alone at midnight on New Year's Eve. That's like, she searched for the right words. That's like having a birthday with no cake or Christmas with no lights. The saddest, loneliest thing in the whole world. She's not wrong, Matteo said, his voice soft. Also, I should warn you. Once Lily decides something, it's basically inevitable. I've learned it's easier to just surrender early. I'm starting to understand that, Reese said, and felt that crack in her chest split wider. Her chicken parmesan arrived, and for the next hour Reese did something she genuinely couldn't remember doing in years. She sat at a table with other people and simply existed. No agenda. No business to discuss. No strategic value to extract. Just conversation, meandering, genuine human conversation. Lily asked questions no adult would dare ask. How old was Reese? 42. Was she married? No. Did she want to be? I haven't thought about it. Why not? I've been busy doing what? Building a company. But what do you do when you're not building? I build more. That sounds exhausting. It's productive. My teacher says productive and happy aren't the same thing. Your teacher sounds annoying. She is, but she's also right. The child's logic was infuriating and devastatingly accurate in equal measure. Between Lily's interrogations, Matteo told stories about their early days in New York, getting hopelessly lost on the subway and ending up at a Polish wedding in Queens. Lily making friends with every single dog in their neighborhood and remembering all their names, their first snow when Lily had stood in the middle of the sidewalk with her tongue out, trying to catch every flake. The first month was brutal, he admitted, his voice dropping lower as Lily got distracted by her drawing. Lily cried herself to sleep every night. I joined her most nights after she was asleep. We were living in this tiny apartment with boxes we couldn't bring ourselves to unpack, eating takeout off the floor because I hadn't built us a table yet. He stared at his wine glass. I kept thinking, what have I done? Did I just make everything worse? Did I drag my grieving daughter across the country to be alone together in a new place? But, Reese prompted, leaning forward despite herself. But then one day, Lily came home from school completely transformed. She'd made a friend, this tiny girl named Maya, who apparently shared Lily's very specific opinions about dinosaurs being underrated and misunderstood. And Lily was happy again. Not the same happy as before, different happy, smaller, maybe, more careful, but real. He smiled at his daughter, and the love in his expression was almost painful to witness. And I realized we were going to survive this. Changed, absolutely scarred, definitely, but alive, still capable of joy. Reese absorbed this. The idea that happiness could be different, that survival could be enough, that broken things might not need to be completely fixed to be beautiful. What about you? Matteo asked. Family, people waiting for you somewhere. A brother, Marcus. The name felt strange in her mouth, like a word from a language she'd forgotten. He lives in Boston. Was she searched for the right word? Distant. But you could be close, Lily interjected, somehow following the entire conversation despite appearing completely absorbed in her drawing. If you wanted, you just have to try. Trying is the hardest part, but also the only part that matters. Lily, your spaghetti is getting cold, Matteo said gently. I'm eating. She demonstrated by shoving an enormous forkful into her mouth, then talking around it. I'm also right. Just because I'm eating doesn't mean I stop being right. Reese looked at this child, this impossible, brilliant, devastating child, and felt the architecture of her carefully constructed life begin to crumble. She'd told herself for years that family was optional, that success was more important than connection, that she could always rebuild those bridges later after she'd proven herself, after she'd made it. She'd made it. She was sitting in a restaurant full of people who didn't know or care about her net worth, watching a 6-year-old eat spaghetti and offer life advice with equal conviction, feeling more seen than she'd felt in her entire adult life. I should call him, Reese said quietly. Marcus, it's been too long. Do it now, Lily commanded, pointing her fork at Ree with the authority of a tiny general. While you're thinking about it, before you get busy again and forget, and more time passes, and it gets harder and harder until eventually you can't remember how to start anymore, and then it's too late and you're alone forever. Matteo and Ree both stared at her. She's been in grief therapy. Matteo explained, his voice a mix of pride and exhaustion since her mum died. Turns out she's an excellent listener. Absorbs everything. Sometimes I'm convinced she's actually 40 years old and just pretending to be 6. I'm 6 3/4, Lily corrected. But wisdom doesn't have an age requirement. Mrs. Chen says paying attention is a superpower, and I have it. Reese pulled out her phone, looking at Marcus' message, still glowing on her screen, unanswered. Happy New Year, stranger. Her finger hovered over the call button. 3 years of missed birthdays and ignored invitations, of choosing board meetings over family dinners, of building walls so high she couldn't see over them anymore. All of it compressed into this single moment of decision. She put the phone away. Not now. Later, I promise. Do you? Lily's eyes were steady, unblinking. Promise, promise, or grown-up promise, which usually means I'll try to remember, but probably won't. Promise, promise, Reese said, surprising herself by meaning it. The dinner continued. Dessert arrived. Tiramisu that Lily insisted on sharing, feeding Reese bites while providing detailed commentary on the flavor profile like a miniature food critic. The restaurant slowly emptied as people left for parties and celebrations, the energy shifting from frenetic to intimate. At 11:30, Matteo paid the bill despite Reese's attempt to intervene. You're our guest, he said firmly when she tried to hand him her credit card. I invited you. That means I pay. I might be broke, but I was raised with manners. They bundled into coats and scarves, Lily vibrating with excitement. Outside, the cold was vicious, but the streets pulsed with life. Thousands of people flowing toward viewing spots, all chasing the same midnight magic. Matteo lifted Lily onto his shoulders in one smooth motion, and she squealed with delight, her hands gripping his hair for balance. Are you really coming? She asked Ree from her elevated perch. To see the fireworks. You're not going to change your mind and go back to your lonely apartment. Ree thought about her penthouse, about the pristine emptiness waiting for her, about every midnight she'd spent alone, convincing herself it was what she wanted. I'm really coming, she said. They joined the human river flowing toward the Brooklyn Bridge, thousands of bodies pressed together, all moving in the same direction with shared purpose. Matteo stayed close to Ree, his hand occasionally touching her elbow to make sure they didn't get separated in the crush. Lily provided running commentary from her perch. Look at that hat, Daddy. Those people have so many balloons. Can we get a dog? That dog is wearing a bow tie, and I need a dog who wears bow ties. They found a spot near the center of the bridge, pressed against the railing with the city spread before them like a promise. Manhattan glittered and pulsed. The Statue of Liberty visible in the distance, the East River reflecting 1,000 lights. 5 minutes, someone shouted. Lily wiggled down from Matteo's shoulders and wedged herself between her father and Ree. She grabbed both their hands with fierce certainty. We have to hold hands for the countdown. It's tradition. Since when? Matteo asked, amused. Since right now, I'm starting it. That's how traditions begin. Someone just decides and then everyone else goes along with it because it's a good idea. Reyes looked down at the small hand gripping hers. When was the last time she'd held someone's hand? She genuinely couldn't remember. Couldn't remember the last time she'd been touched with simple affection, with no transaction or expectation attached. The crowd began counting. 60 seconds 50. What are you wishing for? Lily asked, looking up at Ree. I don't know, Ree answered honestly. You have to wish for something. Otherwise, the new year doesn't know what to bring you. It needs instructions. 30 seconds. 20. Reese looked at this child who'd declared her loneliness unacceptable. At this father who'd invited a stranger into his grief and chosen kindness anyway. At the life she'd built that was all skyscraper and no foundation, all success and absolutely no substance. 10-9-8 I wish Reese said and her voice cracked on the words to be less alone. 7-6-5 Lily squeezed her hand tighter. That's a good wish. That's a really, really good wish. 4-3-2-1 The sky exploded. Fireworks erupted over Manhattan in cascades of impossible color. Gold and silver, crimson and sapphire, shades that had no names and needed none. The crowd roared. Strangers kissed strangers. People embraced, laughed, wept with joy. Someone started singing. The noise was overwhelming and beautiful and completely devastatingly human. And in the middle of it all, Lily turned and threw her arms around Ree with the absolute certainty of a child who decided she mattered. Reyes froze. This small body pressed against hers, arms wrapped tight, complete trust in the embrace. Then something inside her shattered. Not broke, shattered like ice that had been frozen for decades, finally cracking under the weight of spring. She hugged back slowly at first, uncertain like she'd forgotten how, then tighter. She buried her face in Lily's wild curls and felt tears she didn't know she'd been holding spill over. When Lily finally pulled back, she looked up at Ree with satisfaction. See, you're not alone anymore. Mateo was watching them, his expression soft and knowing and impossibly kind. "Happy New Year, Ree." "Happy New Year," she whispered. They stayed on the bridge for another 20 minutes, watching fireworks paint the sky. Lily provided running commentary. Mateo occasionally corrected her more outlandish claims. Reese just watched, feeling the crowd's collective joy seep into her bones, reminding her she was part of something larger than quarterly earnings and acquisition targets. When the displays ended, the crowd began to disperse. Mateo lifted a sleepy Lily back onto his shoulders. "Where do you live?" "Wow," he asked Ree. "We'll walk you." "You don't have to. I'm Upper East Side." "You're going to Brooklyn." "Exactly, which means you're walking alone if we don't come with you." His tone was gentle but absolutely firm, and I wasn't raised to let people walk alone at midnight on New Year's, so humor me. They made their way through the thinning crowds, Lily dozing on her father's shoulders, her arms draped around his head like a crown. The city was quieter now, the celebration moving behind closed doors. "Thank you," Reese said as they walked. "For tonight, for including me. I know it was strange." "It wasn't strange." Mateo adjusted Lily's weight. "It was kind. Or Lily was kind anyway. I just followed her lead. She's got better instincts than I do about people who need saving." "I don't need saving," Reese said automatically. Mateo glanced at her, and his expression was too knowing, too gentle. "Okay." They walked in comfortable silence for several blocks. Finally, they reached a corner where their paths would diverge. "This is me," Reese said, though it wasn't exactly true. She still had blocks to go, but she didn't want to take them further from their route home. Mateo shifted Lily gently and extended his hand. "It was really good meeting you, Reese Langford. I hope your new year is everything you wished for." Reese shook his hand, feeling the calluses, the strength, the reality of a life lived with purpose beyond profit. "You too." She started to walk away, then turned back. "Mateo." He paused. "Lily said something earlier about making beautiful things when you're sad." Reese pulled her coat tighter against the cold in the truth. "I think I'd like to learn how to do that." Mateo's smile was tired and genuine and full of hard-won wisdom. "Start small, one thing at a time. They add up faster than you think." "One thing at a time," Ree repeated. She watched him disappear into the subway entrance, Lily's purple dress visible until the very last moment. Then she was alone again on a Manhattan street at nearly 1 o'clock in the morning on New Year's Day. But the solitude felt different now. Not chosen, not sustainable, not acceptable. Reese pulled out her phone and looked at Marcus's message one more time, 3 words that had sat unanswered while she'd been too busy building an empire to maintain a family. She typed, "Happy New Year. I'm sorry I've been a stranger. Can we talk? Really talk? I miss you." She hit send before she could overthink it, before she could convince herself there were more important things to do. The walk to her building took 15 minutes through confetti-strewn streets. Her doorman greeted her with professional warmth. The elevator rose smoothly to her penthouse. The door opened to reveal everything exactly as she'd left it, 2,400 square feet of architectural perfection that had never once felt like home. Reese stood in the center of her living room and looked at it with new eyes. The furniture chosen by a decorator who'd never asked what she actually liked. The art she'd approved but never really seen. The kitchen that had never produced a meal. The dining table that had never hosted a dinner. She'd built an empire and furnished a mausoleum. Her phone buzzed. "Marcus, I'd really like that. Tomorrow, I'll call you. Thank you for reaching out. I've missed you, too." Retyped back, "Tomorrow, I promise." She made tea in her kitchen using the kettle that still had tags on it, carried it to the window, and looked out at the city. All those lit windows, all those lives she'd never considered important enough to intersect with her own. Somewhere out there, Mateo was tucking Lily into bed, maybe tracing the flowers on her headboard, maybe singing softly while she fell asleep. Somewhere out there, her brother was reading her message and feeling something she hoped was relief. Somewhere inside herself, Ree felt the first crack of something that might eventually become change. She didn't have a resolution in the traditional sense, but she had a wish whispered to a 6-year-old on a bridge full of strangers to be less alone. It was a start, one beautiful thing at a time. The tea had gone cold by the time Ree finally moved from the window. She'd stood there for over an hour, watching the city settle into the quiet hours after midnight, replaying the evening in her mind like footage she needed to analyze for strategic value. Except there was no strategy, no angle, just a little girl in a purple dress who'd pointed across a restaurant and decided loneliness was unacceptable, and a father who'd been kind enough to follow his daughter's lead. Reese carried her untouched tea to the kitchen sink, poured it out, and stood in the dark, listening to the silence of her penthouse, 2,400 square feet of it. She'd bought this place 5 years ago, paid cash, and told herself it was an investment. The decorator had called it minimalist luxury. Standing in it now, Reese recognized it for what it actually was. An expensive storage unit for a person who'd forgotten how to live. Her phone sat on the marble counter, Marcus' message still glowing on the screen. "Tomorrow, I'll call you. Tomorrow." The word felt both impossibly far away and terrifyingly close. What would you even say to him? How did you apologize for 3 years of choosing conference calls over connection? How did you explain that you'd been so busy building an empire you'd forgotten to maintain the only family you had left? Reese picked up her phone and opened her email instead. Safer territory, 47 new messages since she'd left the office 6 hours ago. She scrolled through them with practiced efficiency, acquisition updates, quarterly projections, a crisis at one of her portfolio companies that her team thought required her immediate attention. She typed out a response to the crisis email, deleted it, typed it again. Her fingers hovered over the send button. Making beautiful things when you're sad. That's important. It means the sadness doesn't win. Lily's words echoed in her head, spoken with the absolute certainty of a child who'd lost her mother but still believed in joy. Reese looked at the email, 3 paragraphs of efficient problem-solving that would fix the immediate issue and change absolutely nothing about her life, and deleted it entirely. She sent a different message instead. "Team has this handled. Enjoy your holiday. We'll discuss Monday." Then she turned off her phone. The action felt radical, revolutionary. Reese couldn't remember the last time she'd deliberately disconnected. Even on vacations, the few she'd taken, her phone had been an extension of her hand. Her inbox a lease she'd never thought to remove. She walked through her penthouse in the dark, cataloging it like an acquisition target. The living room with its designer furniture that had never been sat on for any purpose other than waiting for a car service. The dining table that had never hosted a meal. The guest bedroom that had never housed a guest. The kitchen with appliances still in their packaging because cooking for one person seemed pointless, and cooking for others had never been an option. In her bedroom, Reese stood in front of her closet and looked at the rows of identical suits, grey, charcoal, slate, navy, when she was feeling adventurous. She pulled out a hanger at random and held the suit up to the light. Grey isn't a real favorite color. Grey is what you say when you don't actually have an answer, when you don't want to think about what you really like. Reese hung the suit back up and closed the closet door. She was 42 years old and she couldn't name her favorite color. Couldn't remember the last time she'd done something purely because it brought her joy. Couldn't recall a single moment in the past year where she'd felt the kind of uncomplicated happiness she'd witnessed in Lily's face when she talked about her father's carved flowers. She got ready for bed through sheer muscle memory, her mind elsewhere. When she finally lay down, she expected the usual, 3 hours of restless half-sleep interrupted by anxiety dreams about missed opportunities and failed negotiations. Instead, she thought about Mateo's hands, the calluses on them, the way they'd moved when he talked, expressive and certain. Hands that built beautiful things, hands that traced flowers on a headboard to comfort a grieving child. Reese's own hands had signed documents that had destroyed companies, eliminated jobs, restructured entire industries. They were smooth and manicured and had never created anything that couldn't be quantified in a spreadsheet. She fell asleep thinking about purple dresses and spaghetti sauce, and the way Lily had hugged her like she mattered. The phone call from Marcus came at 11 the next morning. Reese had been awake since 7 o'clock. Old habits died hard, but for the first time in years, she hadn't immediately reached for her laptop. Instead, she'd made coffee in her pristine kitchen, nearly burning herself on the espresso machine because she'd never actually learned to use it properly, and sat at her dining table with nothing but a mug in the morning light. When her phone rang with Marcus's name on the screen, she stared at it for 3 full rings before answering. "Hey," she said, and her voice sounded strange, uncertain, human. "Hey yourself, stranger." Marcus's voice was warm with an edge of caution, like he was approaching something fragile. "Happy New Year. Happy New Year." Reese wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. "Thanks for calling. Thanks for texting. I wasn't sure you would." A pause. Actually, I wasn't sure you'd even read my first message. You're usually pretty busy on holidays. The observation landed without accusation, which somehow made it worse. Ree closed her eyes. I read it. I didn't know what to say. And now you do. Not really. She laughed and it came out brittle. I'm still not sure what to say except I'm sorry for being a stranger. For missing everything, for choosing work over, she trailed off, searching for the right word. Over family. Marcus replied gently. Yeah, over family. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't hostile. More like both of them were learning to navigate a conversation they'd forgotten how to have. So, what changed? Marcus asked finally. Between yesterday and today, between 3 years of silence and suddenly wanting to talk, Ree thought about how to explain it. About standing in a restaurant doorway and realizing her reservation meant nothing when there was no one to share it with. About a 6-year-old pointing at her across a crowded room and diagnosing her loneliness with devastating accuracy. About holding a child's hand during a countdown and wishing desperately to be less alone. I met someone last night, she said. Oh, Marcus's voice shifted, became carefully neutral. Is this a romantic? No, God, no. A child, a 6-year-old named Lily and her father. They invited me to join their New Year's dinner because Lily decided I looked sad. Reese sat down her coffee mug. And she was right, Marcus. I am sad. I've been sad for so long, I forgot what the alternative felt like. She heard Marcus exhale long and slow. Ree, I've built this incredible career, she continued, the words spilling out now that she'd started. I've got more money than I know what to do with. I've been on magazine covers. CEOs take my calls. I can make or break companies with a single decision. And last night, I couldn't get a table at a restaurant. I stood there with all my power and none of it mattered because I was alone and everyone else wasn't. Where are you right now? Marcus asked. Home, my penthouse. Are you sitting at that dining table you sent me a picture of when you bought the place? The one that cost more than my car. Reese looked at the table at the single coffee mug that was the only evidence anyone lived here. Yeah, when's the last time you ate an actual meal at it? She opened her mouth to answer and realized she couldn't. I don't know. When's the last time you had anyone over? Friends, colleagues, literally anyone. I don't. Reese's throat tightened. I don't have those kinds of friends. No, Marcus said quietly. You have business contacts. You have people you do deals with, but friends. People who give a damn about you as a person and not as a signature on a contract. Another pause. When's the last time we saw each other, Ree? In person. Reyes did the math and felt sick. 3 years. Your wedding. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. But who's counting? Marcus's voice held a ghost of humor. You stayed for 4 hours. You gave us a very generous check. You left before the cake because you had an early flight to London. I remember. She did. She remembered her nephew, Marcus's oldest son, barely 2 at the time, crying when she tried to hold him because he didn't recognize her. Remembered her sister-in-law Jessica's careful politeness, the kind reserved for distant relatives, you were obligated to invite but didn't expect to show. Remembered feeling out of place at her own brother's wedding, an intruder in a life that had continued perfectly well without her. I have 2 kids now, Marcus said. 2 boys, James's 5, Connor's 2. They're incredible, Ree. Loud and exhausting and so full of love it sometimes hurts to look at them. His voice softened. They don't know they have an aunt. The words hit like a physical blow. Ree pressed her hand against her chest, trying to ease the sudden ache. Marcus, I'm not trying to hurt you, he interrupted gently. I'm just being honest. You asked to really talk, so I'm really talking. You've missed so much. And I get it. You were building your empire. You had priorities. You were focused. But we missed you, Ree. I missed you. My kids are growing up without knowing you exist. And he stopped, cleared his throat. That's not what I wanted for our family. It's not what I wanted either, Ree whispered. I just kept thinking I'd have time later after I closed this deal, after I hit this target, after I proved myself. There was always something more important, more urgent, and I kept pushing family to the bottom of the list because I thought it would wait. It did wait. We waited. But waiting hurts, Ree. I know. I'm so sorry. They sat in silence for a moment. 3 years of distance and hurt compressed into a phone line between Boston and New York. So what now? Marcus asked finally. Are we doing this? Actually trying. I want to, Ree said. I don't know how, but I want to. It's not complicated. You just show up. Literally, metaphorically, whatever. You answer calls, you visit, you meet your nephews, you become part of our lives instead of just someone we mention at Christmas. He paused, and you let us be part of yours. Real part, not just the sanitized version you think we want to see. I don't know if I remember how to do that. Then learn. You're brilliant at learning things when you decide they matter. Make this matter, Ree. She thought about Lily, wedging herself between her father and Ree, grabbing both their hands with fierce certainty. We have to hold hands for the countdown. It's tradition. Starting new traditions because the old ones, or the absence of them, weren't working anymore. Okay, she said. Okay, tell me about your kids. Tell me everything I've missed. And Marcus did. For the next hour, he painted a picture of his life. James' obsession with dinosaurs and his habit of narrating everything like a nature documentary. Connor's recent discovery that screaming in enclosed spaces made excellent echoes. Jessica's return to teaching after maternity leave, their chaotic morning routine that involved more spilled juice than seemed physically possible. He told her about potty training disasters and preschool concerts and the way James had recently started asking why the sky was blue with the kind of persistent curiosity that made Marcus question everything he thought he knew about physics. Ree listened, and with each story she felt the distance between them shrink incrementally. Not disappearing 3 years couldn't be erased in an hour, but becoming crossable. A gap that could be bridged if she was willing to do the work. Come visit, Marcus said as they were wrapping up. Not next week. I know you're busy, but soon. Come meet your nephews. Stay with us. Let Jessica make you her famous lasagna and let the boys destroy any notion you have about quiet mornings. I'd like that, Ree said and meant it. Yeah, Marcus sounded cautiously hopeful. Yeah, really. Okay, good. That's really good, Ree. He cleared his throat. I should go. Connor just woke up from his nap, and based on the shrieking, he's either very happy or very angry. With toddlers, it's impossible to tell until you're in blast radius. Reese laughed, genuine, surprised. Go take care of your angry or happy toddler. I will, and Ree, thank you for reaching out, for trying. Thank you for answering. After they hung up, Ree sat at her expensive dining table in her empty penthouse and cried. Not sad tears exactly, something more complicated. Relief and regret, and a tentative hope that maybe it wasn't too late to become the person she'd neglected to be while building the persona everyone else knew. The rest of New Year's Day passed in strange suspension. Reese found herself unmoored without the usual anchors of work and obligation. She'd turned her phone back on after the call with Marcus, but instead of drowning in emails, she'd set it aside and done something she hadn't done in years, nothing. She sat on her balcony, despite the cold, wrapped in a blanket, and watched the city move below her. From 23 floors up, people looked like pieces in a game, moving with purpose she couldn't discern. How many of them were going to family dinners? How many were meeting friends for brunch, walking dogs, living the messy, connected lives she'd traded for this view? Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Old habits, but something made her pick up. Is this Reese? A man's voice, familiar, but not immediately placeable. Yes. Who's this? It's Matteo from last night. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. Lily found your business card in my coat pocket. Apparently, you gave it to her when I wasn't looking. And she's been insisting all day that I check on you. Reese sat up straighter, something warm unfurling in her chest. She has. She's very concerned that you might be spending the day alone. She's currently standing next to me, demanding to know if you've eaten lunch, and if not, would you like to come to our apartment for grilled cheese because apparently that's the official food of not being sad. She could hear the smile in his voice. Her words, not mine. In the background, a small voice shouted, tell her we have the good cheese, the orange kind, not the white kind that tastes like sadness. Reese laughed, surprising herself. I can hear her. She wants to be heard. Subtlety is not her strong suit. A pause. But seriously, no pressure. If you'd rather have a quiet day, that's completely fine. I just promised Lily I'd call and check. Reese looked around her penthouse, the pristine kitchen, the untouched furniture, the silence that pressed in from all sides. Thought about spending the rest of the day here, alone with her thoughts and her regrets and her expensive view. Thought about a little girl who'd decided she mattered enough to save. What's your address? She asked. Matteo gave her an address in Park Slope, Brooklyn. But really, no pressure. If you I'll be there in an hour, Reese said. Tell Lily I like the orange cheese, too. She hung up and stared at her phone, slightly stunned by her own decision. She just agreed to go to a stranger's apartment for grilled cheese, a carpenter's apartment in Brooklyn, which would probably be small and cluttered and nothing like the spaces she was used to inhabiting, and she was looking forward to it. Ree changed out of her loungewear, silk pajamas that cost more than reasonable, and into jeans. She couldn't remember the last time she'd worn jeans, maybe college. She paired them with a cashmere sweater, simpler than her usual armor of designer suits, and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked younger, uncertain, human. The subway ride to Brooklyn was an exercise in humility. Ree couldn't remember the last time she'd taken public transportation. Her company car was always waiting, Uber always available. But something about this day, about this choice, demanded she do it differently. She navigated the subway system with her phone's GPS. Feeling wildly out of place among families heading home from day trips and young couples still celebrating New Year's. An elderly woman offered her a seat despite Reese being younger. A kid in a Spider-Man costume stared at her until his mother redirected his attention. By the time she emerged at the 7th Avenue station, she felt like she'd traveled to a different city entirely. Park Slope was beautiful in the late afternoon light, tree-lined streets with brownstones that radiated the kind of Liverden warmth her building would never possess. Kids played on stoops. A couple walked hand-in-hand with a dog. A corner bodega advertised fresh coffee and lottery tickets with equal enthusiasm. Mateo's building was a modest 3-story walk-up with a green door and window boxes that were empty for winter. Rechecked the address 3 times before buzzing the apartment number he'd given her. "It's open. 4th floor." Mateo's voice crackled through the ancient intercom. Reese climbed stairs that creaked under her feet, past a bike locked to the railing, and a potted plant someone was keeping alive despite the season. She could hear music playing somewhere. Classical, maybe Vivaldi, and voices arguing pleasantly in what sounded like Russian. Mateo's door was painted bright blue. Before she could knock, it flew open to reveal Lily in the same purple dress from last night, though now accessorized with a chef's hat that was comically large on her small head. "You came." Lily threw her arms around Reese's waist. "Daddy said you might be too busy, but I knew you'd come because you promised, and you seem like someone who keeps promises, even when they're hard." Mateo appeared behind his daughter, wearing faded jeans and a t-shirt with what looked like paint stains. His hair was damp like he just showered. "Lily, let her breathe. She just got here. I am letting her breathe. This is a hug, not a stranglehold. There's a difference." Lily pulled back and grabbed Reese's hand. "Come see our apartment. It's not fancy like yours probably is, but Daddy made most of the furniture, and that makes it special." Reese let herself be dragged inside, and the first thing that struck her was the warmth. Not temperature, though it was pleasantly heated, but the warmth of a space that was actually lived in. Loved in. The apartment was small, maybe 800 square feet, but every inch was intentional. The living room held a couch that looked handmade, probably by Mateo, with cushions and jewel tones, and a throw blanket that was definitely hand-knitted. Bookshelves lined one wall stuffed with children's books and carpentry manuals and what looked like poetry collections. A coffee table held Lily's current art project. A castle made of cardboard and covered in glitter. "Daddy made everything," Lily announced proudly. "The couch, the shelves, my bed, the table. Everything except the stove because that came with the apartment. And also, it would be dangerous." "It's beautiful," Reese said, and she meant it. The furniture had a quality her decorators' expensive pieces lacked. Personality. Each piece looked like it had been made with specific hands for a specific purpose, not mass-produced in a factory somewhere. "Lily, why don't you show Reese your room while I make the grilled cheese?" Mateo suggested. "Fair warning, it's going to be extremely pink." "It's not extremely pink. It's perfectly pink," Lily corrected, already pulling Reese down the hallway. "There's a difference." Lily's room was indeed very pink. Pink walls, pink curtains, pink rug. But what caught Reese's attention was the bed, clearly handmade with elaborate flowers carved into the headboard. She moved closer, tracing the roses and daisies and the single large sunflower that dominated the center. "These are incredible," she said. Softly. "Daddy made it for me when Mommy died," Lily said matter-of-factly. "So I'd have something beautiful to look at when I was sad. It took him 3 months. He worked on it every night after I went to sleep. And then one day it just appeared and I cried, but happy crying, not sad crying." Reese's throat tightened. "Your dad loves you very much." I know. Lily climbed onto the bed and patted the space next to her. You can sit. Daddy says furniture is for using, not looking at. Reese sat carefully on the edge of the bed. Up close, she could see the incredible detail in the carvings. Each petal, each leaf rendered with precision and care. Do you have anyone who makes you beautiful things? Lily asked, her head tilted in that way she had, like she was studying a particularly interesting puzzle. No, Reese said honestly. Why not? I don't know. I guess I've been too busy for beautiful things. Lily considered this with the seriousness of a much older person. That's sad. Everyone needs beautiful things. Otherwise, what's the point of not being sad? Before Ree could respond, Matteo called from the kitchen, lunch is ready. And by lunch, I mean extremely mediocre grilled cheese and tomato soup from a can. It's not mediocre, Lily shouted back, scrambling off the bed. It's perfect. Come on, Ree. You have to eat it while it's hot or the cheese gets weird. The kitchen was tiny. Barely room for 2 people, let alone 3. But they made it work. Lily chattering constantly while Matteo served grilled cheese cut into triangles and soup in mismatched bowls that look handmade, probably from a pottery class. This is wonderful, Ree said after her first bite. And she wasn't being polite. There was something about the simplicity of it. Good bread, good cheese, butter that had been allowed to brown slightly in the pan that made her expensive dinner seem hollow by comparison. It's Lily's favorite, Matteo said, sitting across from her at the small table. Though to be fair, most of her favorites involve cheese in some form. Cheese is perfect, Lily said around a mouthful. It's happy food. Sad people need happy food. They ate in comfortable chaos. Lily dominating the conversation with theories about everything from why birds didn't get cold, they had built-in sweaters made of feathers, to what she wanted to be when she grew up, either a veterinarian or a dragon, she hadn't decided. Matteo interjected occasionally with gentle corrections or encouragements, and Ree found herself laughing more in 30 minutes than she had in the past 6 months. After lunch, Lily demanded they play a game she'd apparently invented called Castle Wars, which seemed to involve a lot of running around the apartment making explosion noises. Ree, who couldn't remember the last time she'd played anything that wasn't strategic or competitive in nature, found herself hiding behind the couch while Lily attacked with foam swords and Matteo provided dramatic sound effects. At some point during the chaos, while Lily was busy constructing a fortress of impenetrable doom out of couch cushions, Matteo sat down next to Ree on the floor, both of them breathing hard. Thank you for coming, he said quietly. I know this is probably not how you usually spend your time. It's perfect, Ree said and realized she meant it. This is exactly how I should be spending my time. Matteo studied her with those tired knowing eyes. Can I ask you something? Sure. Last night when Lily invited you to join us, why did you say yes? You could have walked out. Most people would have. Ree thought about how to answer, about standing in that restaurant doorway, feeling the weight of every choice she'd made pressing down on her shoulders, about realizing that all her power and money couldn't buy her what these strangers had. Connection, warmth, the simple joy of belonging. Because your daughter looked at me and saw something I'd been pretending didn't exist, she said finally. She saw that I was lonely, and instead of looking away like everyone else does, she decided to do something about it, and I was so tired of pretending I was fine. Matteo nodded slowly. Lily has this way of seeing straight through people's armor. Her therapist says it's because she had to learn early that honesty matters, that time is precious, that you should say the important things before you don't get the chance. His voice caught slightly. Her mum was sick for 8 months before she died. Lily spent that whole time learning that tomorrow isn't guaranteed. I'm sorry, Ree said. That must have been impossible. It was. Some days it still is. Matteo leaned back against the couch. But we're surviving. More than surviving some days. Finding joy in weird places like making forts out of couch cushions with billionaires who look terrified of foam swords. Reese laughed. Is that what I look like? Little bit. His smile was gentle. But you're doing great. Lily hasn't declared war on someone this enthusiastically in weeks. It's a sign of deep affection. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Lily arrange her fortress with military precision. What about you? Matteo asked. What happened that brought you to our table last night? Besides the restaurant being full, Ree considered deflecting, falling back on the practice vagueness she used in all personal conversations. But something about this small apartment, this kind man, this day that had already required more honesty than she was used to made her want to tell the truth. I've spent 20 years building a career, she said. And somewhere in there, I forgot to build anything else. I looked up yesterday and realized I had everything I thought I wanted and absolutely no one to share it with. My brother barely speaks to me. I don't have friends, just business contacts. I can't remember the last time someone touched me with affection instead of obligation. She swallowed hard. And then your daughter pointed at me and said I looked sad, and I realized I've been sad for so long I'd forgotten what the alternative felt like. Matteo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. What are you going to do about it? I don't know, Ree admitted. I called my brother this morning. That's a start. Came here. Also a start. Beyond that, she shrugged helplessly. I don't have a strategic plan for not being lonely. That's not something they teach you in business school. I don't think there is a strategic plan, Matteo said. I think you just show up. Keep showing up. Let people in even when it's scary. Especially when it's scary. He met her eyes. For what it's worth, I'm glad you showed up here. Lily would have been disappointed and I would have too. Before Ree could respond, Lily emerged from her fortress. Ree, I finished the fortress. Come see. It has 17 rooms and a moat made of blue blanket. The afternoon stretched into evening. They ordered pizza for dinner. Lily's choice extra cheese, which seemed to be her solution to everything. Matteo opened a bottle of wine that was definitely not expensive, but somehow tasted better than anything Reese had in her penthouse collection. They ate on the floor because the fortress had consumed the table, and Lily narrated an elaborate story about the princess who lived there and fought dragons on weekends. At some point, Lily fell asleep mid-sentence, sprawled across Reese's lap like it was the most natural thing in the world. Matteo lifted her gently, carried her to her pink room, and returned a few minutes later. She's out, he said, settling back onto the floor next to Ree. That's her pattern. Full speed until she crashes completely. But Reese looked at the spot where Lily had been, still feeling the warmth of her small body. She's remarkable. She is. Matteo refilled their wine glasses. She saved my life, I think. After my wife died, there were days I didn't want to keep going, but Lily needed me, and that was enough. Some days barely, but enough. They sat in the dim light of the living room, and Reese felt something shift between them, a deepening like they were moving from polite strangers to something more solid. Can I ask what she was like? Reese said quietly. Your wife. Matteo smiled, sad and fond at once. Sarah. She was a teacher, 2nd grade. She had this laugh that was completely disproportionate to her size. This huge, ridiculous laugh that made everyone around her start laughing, too. He stared into his wine. She was patient with me in ways I didn't deserve. Believed in me when I wanted to quit my corporate job and build furniture. Told me life was too short to be miserable for a paycheck. His voice cracked slightly. She was right about that. Life is too short. I'm sorry she's gone, Ree said. Me too. Every single day. Matteo looked at her. But I'm learning to carry it. The grief and the love. All of it. Learning to keep living even though she can't. That's what she'd want. That's what Lily needs. They talked for another hour, the conversation moving from heavy to light and back again with the ease of people who'd somehow skipped past small talk into something more real. Matteo told her about his carpentry, about the satisfaction of creating something with his hands. Ree told him about her work, about the thrill of turning struggling companies around, but also about the emptiness of spending every waking hour in pursuit of numbers on a screen. Do you ever think about doing something different? Matteo asked. I don't know what else I'd do, Ree admitted. This is all I've been for so long. That's not true. You're also someone who came to a stranger's apartment for grilled cheese. Someone who played Castle Wars with a 6-year-old. Someone who's trying to reconnect with her brother. He smiled. You're more than your job, Ree. You just forgot for a while. When Ree finally left around 9 o'clock, Matteo walked her to the door. Thank you for today, she said. I needed this more than I knew how to say. You're welcome here anytime, Matteo said. And I mean that. Lily will probably demand updates on your favorite color situation, so fair warning. Reese laughed. I'll work on it. She was halfway down the stairs when he called after her. Ree. She turned one beautiful thing at a time. Remember, you're doing it. Keep going. On the subway ride home, Ree leaned her head against the window and watched Brooklyn blur into Manhattan. Lights and lives passing by. She felt different. Lighter, maybe, or maybe just more aware of how heavy she'd been carrying everything. Her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. She opened it to find a photo. Lily asleep in her bed, one hand trailing over the carved flowers. Below it, a message from Mateo. She wanted me to tell you thank you for coming. Also, she's decided purple is too obvious and is now considering sparkle as her favorite color. Apparently, you inspired deep reflection. Rihei smiled and typed back, tell her I'm still thinking about mine. Making progress. When she got home, her penthouse felt different. Still empty, but the emptiness felt less permanent, like a space waiting to be filled rather than a tomb she'd constructed around herself. She didn't check her email, didn't review acquisition targets or prep for Monday meetings. Instead, she sat at her dining table and pulled out her laptop, opening a blank document. She stared at it for a long time. Then she typed, things I actually like. It took her 2 hours to come up with 10 items. Coffee. Real coffee, not the bitter office version. Thunderstorms. The smell of old books. That first bite of something sweet after a long day. Her nephew's laugh from the one time she'd actually paid attention to him at Marcus's wedding. The way Lily said things with absolute certainty, the calluses on Mateo's hands, the flowers carved into a headboard made of love and grief. It was a start, one beautiful thing at a time. By the time Ree typed the 10th item on her list, it was past midnight, and her coffee had gone cold again. She read through what she'd written, these fragments of personhood she'd buried under years of quarterly reports and acquisition strategies, and felt something close to recognition, like meeting a stranger who had her face. She saved the document, things I actually like, and closed her laptop. The penthouse was silent except for the ambient hum of the city 23 floors below, but the silence felt less oppressive now, less like punishment and more like possibility. Her phone lit up with another text from Mateo. Just a simple good night. Nothing profound, but Reese found herself reading it 3 times before setting the phone down. When was the last time someone had wished her good night? When was the last time she'd had someone to wish it to? Monday arrived with the inevitability of a reckoning. Reese woke at 6 out of habit, her body conditioned by decades of pre-dawn conference calls and early meetings. But instead of immediately reaching for her phone, she lay in bed for 10 extra minutes, watching the winter light creep across her ceiling. Small rebellion, baby steps. When she finally checked her email, she had 63 messages waiting. Her assistant had sent 5 increasingly urgent notes about the crisis at TechVision, one of her portfolio companies. The CEO wanted an emergency call. The board was threatening to resign. Investors were panicking. The old Ree would have been on the phone before her feet hit the floor, fighting fires and making executive decisions before breakfast. The new Ree, if that's what she was becoming, stared at the messages and felt a strange disconnect. This crisis that demanded her immediate attention. This emergency that couldn't wait. Would it matter in a year, in 5 years? Would solving it make her less alone? She sent a response to her assistant. Schedule the call for 10. I'll handle it then. Then she made herself breakfast. Actually made it, not just grabbed a protein bar on her way out the door. Scrambled eggs that were slightly overdone because she'd forgotten how to judge timing. Toast that burned on one side, coffee she took time to drink while sitting at her dining table. It was terrible and perfect and entirely her own. The emergency call at 10 was everything she'd expected. TechVision CEO had made a series of catastrophic decisions. The board was in open revolt and everyone wanted Ree to fix it immediately. She listened to 20 minutes of panic and recrimination before cutting through the noise. Here's what's going to happen, she said, her voice carrying the authority that had made her famous. Tom, you're taking a leave of absence effective immediately. The board will appoint an interim CEO. I'm recommending Janet from operations. She's been carrying this company for months anyway. We'll restructure the leadership team, implement the cost-cutting measures we should have done 6 months ago, and we'll do it all quietly without spooking the investors further. Silence on the line. Then Tom's voice, defensive and desperate. You can't just remove me. I built this company. You built a company that's now hemorrhaging money and talent because you refused to make hard choices. Reese kept her tone, clinical business-like. This isn't personal, Tom. It's practical. You can fight me and watch everything collapse, or you can step aside gracefully and maybe salvage your reputation. More silence, then fine. But I want this in writing. You'll have it by end of day. Reese ended the call and sat back in her office chair, staring at the Manhattan skyline outside her window. She'd just dismantled a CEO's career in under 30 minutes, efficiently, effectively, exactly the way she'd been doing it for 20 years. So why did it feel hollow? Her assistant appeared in the doorway. That was decisive. The board is already moving forward with your recommendations. Of course they are. Reese turned from the window. Anything else urgent? The Morrison acquisition closes Friday. They want you there for the signing. Fine. What else? You have 17 meeting requests for this week, 3 dinner invitations from potential partners, and Forbes wants to schedule your next cover shoot. Reese looked at her calendar at the blocks of time already consumed by obligations and opportunities, every hour accounted for. Every day structured around other people's needs and her company's growth. The architecture of a life that left no room for grilled cheese in Brooklyn or phone calls with brothers or figuring out her favorite color. Clear Thursday afternoon, she said suddenly. Her assistant blinked. Thursday afternoon. You have the Goldman meeting at 2 and the reschedule them. I need Thursday afternoon. For what? Rihei thought about Lily asking when she was coming back to visit, about Mateo's invitation to see his workshop, about the promise she'd made to herself to start showing up for life instead of just managing it. Personal time. Her assistant stared at her like she'd announced she was joining the circus. Personal time. You want me to block personal time on your calendar? Is that a problem? No, it's just you've never asked for that before. Not in the 8 years I've worked for you. Well, I'm asking now. Reese turned back to her computer. Also, I need you to research flights to Boston. Weekend trips, flexible dates sometime in the next month. Boston. Her assistant pulled out her phone, already typing notes. Business or personal? I'm visiting my brother. If her assistant was shocked, she hid it professionally. I'll send you options by end of day. After she left, Reese sat alone in her office and marveled at how strange it felt to claim time for herself, to deliberately create space in her schedule for things that wouldn't increase her net worth or expand her influence. Revolutionary acts, apparently, eating lunch with family, visiting a carpenter's workshop, learning to be human again. Her phone rang. Marcus. Hey, she answered. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. Better than fine, actually. Marcus sounded pleased with himself. Jessica and I were talking and we want to invite you up for the weekend. Not next weekend. We've got a birthday party situation, but the weekend after. Can you make it? Reese pulled up her calendar, already knowing what she'd find. A fundraiser on Saturday, a conference on Sunday, both important for networking and visibility. Both completely skippable if she chose to skip them. Yes, she said before she could overthink it. I'll be there. Really? Marcus' surprise was evident. I was prepared for you to say you were too busy. I'm sure I am too busy. I'm choosing to come anyway. She could hear the smile in his voice. The boys are going to lose their minds. Fair warning, James has already declared he's going to teach you everything he knows about velociraptors, which is extensive and highly dubious scientifically. I look forward to dubious velociraptor facts. Marcus' voice softened. Thank you for trying, for showing up. It means everything. After they hung up, Reese sat in her office, feeling something unfamiliar settled in her chest. Anticipation, maybe. The sense that she had something to look forward to beyond the next deal closing or quarterly earnings report. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lily sent from Mateo's phone based on the number. Did you pick a color yet? Daddy says I'm being pushy, but this is important. Reese smiled and typed back, still deciding. It's a very serious decision. Can't rush it. The response came immediately. Okay, but hurry because I'm making you something and I need to know what color to use. You're making me something. It's a surprise. Daddy says surprises are more fun than knowing everything all the time. Do you like surprises? Reese thought about it. Did she like surprises in business? Surprises were usually catastrophes. In life, she'd structured everything to avoid them. Controlled environments, predictable outcomes, no variables she couldn't manage. I think I'm learning to like them, she typed. Good. Surprises are the best. Come visit soon so I can give you the thing I'm making. Also, Daddy wants to show you his workshop, but he's too shy to ask. Reese's smile widened. She could picture Mateo reading over Lily's shoulder, probably mortified that his daughter had no filter whatsoever. Tell your dad I'd love to see his workshop. Thursday afternoon. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. This is Mateo. Sorry, Lily hijacked my phone. Thursday works if you're sure. No pressure. I'm sure. Send me the address. We'll do. Fair warning, it's not fancy. Just a small space in Gowner's with a lot of sawdust. Sounds perfect. The week crawled and sprinted simultaneously. Reese moved through her usual routine, meetings, calls, decisions that affected hundreds of people and millions of dollars. But she felt increasingly disconnected from it all, like she was watching herself perform a role she'd mastered but no longer believed in. Wednesday afternoon, she had lunch with Catherine Chen, a venture capitalist she'd known for 15 years. They met at a restaurant Ree had been to dozens of times, ordered their usual dishes, fell into their usual conversation about deals and market trends. Halfway through her salmon, Catherine paused. "Are you okay? You seem distracted." Reese looked up from her plate. "Do I? You've checked your phone twice in the last 20 minutes. Usually, I can't pull your attention away with dynamite when we're talking shop." Catherine studied her with sharp eyes. "What's going on?" "Nothing. Just tired." Catherine set down her fork. "We've known each other too long for you to sell me that." "What's really going on?" Reese considered deflecting, but something about Catherine's direct gaze made her want to try honesty. "Have you ever felt like you were successful at exactly the wrong things?" Catherine blinked. "That's unexpectedly philosophical for a Wednesday lunch." "I'm serious. You've built this incredible career. You're on every major board. You're worth more than most small countries. Are you happy?" "Happy." Catherine laughed, but it sounded hollow. "I'm successful. Isn't that the same thing?" "Is it?" They sat in silence for a moment. Two powerful women who'd conquered their industry, realizing they'd never actually asked themselves if the conquest had been worth it. "I met someone on New Year's Eve," Reese said finally, "a little girl. She asked me what my favorite color was and I couldn't answer." "I'm 42 years old, Catherine. I've closed billion-dollar deals and I can't name my favorite color." Catherine stared at her. "What did you tell her?" "Gray. And she told me that gray isn't a real favorite color. It's what you say when you don't want to think about what you actually like." Brutal. "How old is this kid?" 6. "Christ." Catherine picked up her wine glass. "Out of the mouths of babes, I guess." Greater than she invited me to dinner with her and her father, complete strangers. And I went, and it was the most real conversation I've had in years. Reese met Catherine's eyes. "When's the last time you did something that wasn't strategic, that didn't advance your career or expand your network?" Catherine opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I don't know. Neither did I until last week." They finished lunch with a different kind of conversation, one that felt more honest than their usual careful networking. When they parted outside the restaurant, Catherine hugged her. Awkward and brief, but genuine. "Whatever you're figuring out," Catherine said, "I hope you land somewhere good." You, too. Thursday afternoon arrived with January rain, the kind that turned New York into a gray watercolor. Ree left her office at 2, ignoring the surprised looks from her team. She took the subway to Gowner's, emerging into an industrial neighborhood of warehouses and auto shops, the air heavy with the smell of metal and rain. Mateo's workshop was exactly as he'd described, a small space tucked between a metalwork studio and a craft brewery. The sign outside reads "Carpentry" in simple letters. Through the window, Ree could see wood stacked against walls, tools hanging in organized rows, sawdust coating every surface like fine snow. She knocked. Mateo appeared wearing work pants and a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, sawdust in his hair. His face broke into a smile when he saw her. "You came. I said I would." "I know, but you're a billionaire CEO. I figured there was a 50-50 chance something more important would come up." There was definitely something more important. "I came anyway." Mateo's smile widened. "Come in, mind the sawdust and the general chaos." "And Lily," she insisted on coming after school to supervise. Lily appeared from behind a workbench, wearing safety goggles that were comically large on her small face. "Ree, you're here. Daddy's making a table for a fancy restaurant, and I'm quality control." "Quality control, huh?" Reese stepped into the workshop, immediately struck by the smell. Fresh cut wood, varnish, something earthy and real. "Very important job," Lily said seriously. "I have to make sure everything is perfect. No wobbles, no splinters, only beauty." The workshop was small but meticulously organized. Every tool had its place. Wood was sorted by type and size. In the center, a partially finished table stood on sawhorses, its grain catching the light from the windows. "It's beautiful," Ree said, running her hand along the smooth surface. "It's walnut," Mateo said, coming to stand beside her. The client wants a live edge, keeping the natural contours of the tree instead of cutting it straight. Makes every piece unique. Like people, Lily announced. Daddy says furniture should have personality just like people do. Reese studied the table, the way the wood curved and dipped imperfect and lovely. How long does something like this take? This one. About 40 hours so far. I've got another 20 to go. Matteo picked up a piece of sandpaper demonstrating the motion. It's all hand-finished. No machines for the detail work, just time and attention. 40 hours for one table, give or take. That's why I'll never be rich doing this. He said it without bitterness, just fact. But it'll last generations. Someone's going to gather around this table for family dinners, important conversations, regular life. That matters more than efficient production. Reese thought about her penthouse full of furniture chosen for aesthetics and never used for actual living. Can you teach me? Matteo looked surprised. Teach you what? This. Woodworking. Making something with my hands. She gestured at the workshop. I've spent 20 years making decisions that move numbers around on screens. I want to make something real. You want to learn carpentry? Matteo's expression was carefully neutral, like he couldn't tell if she was serious. Why not? You said it yourself. One beautiful thing at a time. I want to learn how to make beautiful things. Lily bounced excitedly. Daddy, you have to teach her. You're the best teacher. You taught me how to sand without getting splinters. Matteo studied Reese for a long moment. It's hard work, physical. You'll get splinters even with gloves. You'll mess up a lot before you get anything right. I'm okay with that. It's not glamorous. It's dusty and your hands will hurt. And Matteo re-met his eyes. I'm asking to learn something real. To make something that exists beyond a spreadsheet. Can you teach me or not? His expression softened. Yeah, I can teach you. They started with the basics. Matteo showed her how to hold a chisel, how to read the grain of wood, how to sand with the texture instead of against it. Lily provided running commentary and occasional quality checks that mostly involved her standing very close and squinting seriously. Reese's first attempts were terrible. The chisel slipped, gouging the practice wood. Her sanding was uneven. She gave herself a splinter within the first 15 minutes. Ow! She pulled her hand back, examining the tiny wooden needle embedded in her thumb. First one always hurts the most, Matteo said, gently taking her hand. He pulled out the splinter with practiced ease, his touch careful. You get used to it, do you? Reese looked at her thumb at the small bead of blood forming. No, but you get better at accepting they're part of the process. He met her eyes, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe recognition that they were talking about more than just splinters. They worked for 2 hours. Matteo was patient, correcting her grip without making her feel incompetent, showing her the same technique multiple times when she couldn't get it right. Lily alternated between helping and creating elaborate stories about the wood they were working with. This piece was from a magic tree that one had been struck by lightning. All of them had important destinies. By the time they stopped, Reese's hands hurt. Her shoulders ached, and she'd managed to create something that could charitably be called a very rough cutting board. It was uneven, scarred with mistakes, completely impractical for actual use. She'd never been prouder of anything in her life. I made this, she said, holding it up to the light. You did, Matteo smiled. It's terrible. It's the worst cutting board I've ever seen, completely unusable. I love it. Lily grabbed Reese's arm, jumping excitedly. You made a beautiful thing. Even though it's ugly, it's still beautiful because you made it with trying. With trying, Ree repeated and felt something crack open in her chest. Yeah, I guess I did. Matteo insisted on buying them dinner. You worked hard. You've earned carbs. And they ended up at a small Thai place down the street. Lily ordered pad Thai and proceeded to wear more of it than she ate. Matteo told stories about his worst carpentry mistakes, each one more catastrophic than the last. Reese found herself laughing so hard she choked on her curry, tears streaming down her face while Matteo pounded her back and Lily narrated the event like a sports announcer. This was living. She realized this messy, imperfect, completely unstrategic connection with people who didn't care about her net worth or her business acumen. This was what she'd been missing while building her empire of efficiency and control. When they finally left the restaurant, Lily was half asleep on Matteo's shoulders, her chef's hat long abandoned. Thank you for today, Reese said as they walked toward the subway. For teaching me, for letting me be terrible at something and not judging me for it. Everyone should be terrible at something new occasionally, Mateo said. Keeps you humble, keeps you human. I think I forgot how to be human somewhere along the way. Then it's good you're remembering. He adjusted Lily's weight. Same time next week, we can work on making that cutting board slightly less catastrophic. I'd like that. As Ree rode the subway home, her terrible cutting board wrapped carefully in newspaper and tucked under her arm, she caught her reflection in the window. She looked different, tired in a good way, satisfied in a way that had nothing to do with closing deals or crushing competitors. Her phone buzzed with an email from her assistant. The Morrison acquisition had hit a snag, needed her immediate attention. In the old world, the world from 2 weeks ago, she would have been on her laptop immediately, sacrificing sleep to solve the problem. Instead, she sent a quick response. Team can handle this. Brief me in the morning. Then she put her phone away and just rode the train, watching the city scroll by, her rough cutting board solid and real against her side. When she got home, she didn't put the cutting board away in a drawer or closet. She set it on her dining table right in the center where she could see it. A reminder that imperfection could be beautiful, that trying mattered more than succeeding, that she was learning slowly and painfully how to be more than just successful. Her phone rang. Marcus, hey, are we still on for this weekend? Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. The boys are so excited. James has prepared a presentation about dinosaurs with visual aids. It's 45 minutes long. Ray's laughed. I can't wait. Really, because you sound like you actually mean that. I do mean it. She looked at her cutting board at this thing she'd made with her own imperfect hands. I really do. After they hung up, Reese made tea properly this time, using the kettle correctly, taking time to let it steep. She sat at her dining table with her terrible cutting board and her hot tea and thought about how her life was slowly, painfully reconstructing itself into something that might actually feel like living. Her phone buzzed one more time. A photo from Mateo. Lily asleep in bed, one hand trailing over the carved flowers, the other clutching what looked like a small wooden heart painted purple. The text below read, "She finished your surprise. Won't let me tell you what it is, but apparently it's extremely important and color appropriate. See you next week." Reese smiled and set her phone down. Next week, a visit to Boston. More carpentry lessons. Slowly building a life that had room for more than just success. One beautiful thing at a time. The rain picked up outside, drumming against her windows. Instead of feeling trapped by it, Ree felt oddly comforted, like the city was settling in around her, making space for her to finally settle into herself. She opened her laptop and pulled up the document she'd started on New Year's Day. Things I actually like. She read through her original list, then added 3 more items. The smell of fresh cut wood, the satisfaction of making something imperfect with your own hands, the sound of a child's laughter over terrible pad thai. It was growing. Slowly but growing. She was growing. Slowly but growing. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Reese Langford went to bed not because she was exhausted from work, but because she was tired in the good way, the way that came from actually living a day instead of just surviving it. In her dreams, she carved flowers into wood. Each petal imperfect but intentional. Each one a small act of beauty in a life that was finally learning what beauty meant. The train to Boston left Penn Station at 8:30 Saturday morning, and Ree was on it with a bag she'd packed herself. No assistant, no carefully curated wardrobe selected by someone else, just jeans, sweaters, and the kind of casual clothes she'd had to actually go shopping for because her closet contained nothing appropriate for playing with children or being an actual human person. She'd also packed the terrible cutting board, wrapped carefully in bubble wrap. Marcus boys deserved to see what their aunt had made with her own incompetent hands. The landscape blurred past her window. Industrial New Jersey giving way to Connecticut suburbs. The gray January morning making everything look like a watercolor left out in the rain. Reese tried to read the acquisition reports her assistant had sent, but the words slid off her brain without sticking. She gave up after 20 minutes and just watched the world scroll by, her mind somewhere between anxious and eager. When was the last time she'd been nervous about something that wasn't a negotiation? When was the last time she'd cared about making a good impression on someone who couldn't do anything for her career? Her phone buzzed. Lily texting from Mateo's phone again. "Are you being brave today? Daddy says visiting family when you've been gone a long time takes bravery." Reese smiled and typed back. "Trying to be brave. It's harder than I expected. That's because you're doing it right. Easy brave isn't real brave. Come see us when you get back and tell me about your nephews. Also, I finished your surprise and it's very good. Can't wait to see it. You have to act surprised even though you know it's coming. That's the rule of surprises. I'll practice my surprised face on the train. Marcus was waiting at South Station when she arrived, leaning against a pillar with his hands in his pockets and an expression that was equal parts hopeful and guarded. He looked older than Ree remembered, more grey at his temples, deeper lines around his eyes, but his smile when he saw her was the same one from childhood. You actually came, he said as she approached. I said I would. Ree stopped a few feet away, suddenly unsure of the protocol. Did they hug, shake hands, stand at awkward distance forever? Marcus solved the problem by pulling her into an embrace that was tight and brief and somehow exactly right. He smelled like coffee in some kind of woodsy cologne familiar in a way that made Reese's throat tighten. It's good to see you, he said when he pulled back. Really good. You, too. They walked to his car, making small talk about the train ride and the weather. Both of them dancing around the weight of 3 years of silence. Marcus drove a sensible Honda with car seats in the back and Cheerios ground into the floor mats. So different from Reese's town car that it felt like stepping into an alternate universe. The boys are vibrating with excitement, Marcus said as he navigated through Boston traffic. James has been asking every 5 minutes when you're getting here. Connor doesn't really understand who you are, but he's excited because James is excited and that's how toddlers work. I brought him presents, Ree said, then immediately worried she'd done it wrong. Is that okay? I didn't know what they'd like, so I just Reese. Marcus glanced at her. Whatever you brought is fine. You're here. That's the present that matters. They drove to Brooklyn to a neighborhood of old trees and family homes that radiated the kind of settled warmth Reese's building would never achieve. Marcus' house was a 2-story colonial with toys scattered across the front lawn and a crooked snowman melting in the January thaw. Before they even reached the front door, it flew open and a small human launched himself at Marcus. Daddy, is that her? Is that Aunt Ree? She's here. Connor, she's here. James was 5 and apparently made entirely of energy and opinions. He had Marcus's eyes and a smile that took up his whole face. He stared at Ree with unabashed curiosity, taking in everything from her designer coat to her expensive boots. You're really tall, he announced. I am, Ree agreed. And you're wearing fancy clothes, like business fancy. Are you here for business? No, I'm here to visit you. Really? James' eyes went wide. Daddy said you're always busy with business. That's why we haven't met you before except when I was a baby and I don't remember that. Marcus winced. James, maybe let Aunt Reese come inside before we get into the complicated family dynamics. What's dynamics? It's when adults make things harder than they need to be. Come on, let's go find your brother. Inside the house was chaos in the best possible way. Toys everywhere. Kids' artwork covering the refrigerator. A half-built block tower dominating the living room floor. It smelled like coffee and something baking and the particular scent of a home where people actually lived. Jessica emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was petite and blonde with laugh lines that suggested she smiled more than she frowned. And when she saw Ree, her expression was carefully welcoming. Ree, it's good to see you again. You, too. Thank you for having me. Reese felt suddenly acutely aware that she was the outsider here. The stranger invading this warm established family unit. We're really glad you came. Jessica's smile seemed genuine. The boys have been. James, don't climb on your aunt. She just got here. James had attached himself to Reese's leg and was attempting to scale her like a tree. I'm showing her I'm strong. I can climb anything. Watch. I can see that, Reese said, unsure what to do with a 5-year-old using her as mountaineering equipment. A crash from the kitchen interrupted whatever was about to happen next. Jessica sighed. That would be Connor. He's discovered that gravity works and is testing it extensively. I'll help, Reese heard herself say. In the kitchen, a toddler stood in the wreckage of what appeared to have been a tower of plastic containers, looking immensely pleased with himself. He had curly dark hair and Marcus's smile and absolutely no remorse for the chaos he'd created. Boom, Dad, he announced proudly when he saw Reese. Big boom. Very big boom, Reese agreed, kneeling to help collect the scattered containers. Connor watched her with intense focus, then grabbed one of the containers and dropped it again. Boom. Connor, we're trying to clean up, not make more mess, Jessica said. But she was laughing. Boom is fun, Connor explained with perfect toddler logic. They cleaned up together, Jessica making easy conversation that didn't demand much from Ree beyond presence. James provided running commentary on everything. Why those containers were inferior to other containers, his theories about gravity, his upcoming presentation about velociraptors that Aunt Ree absolutely had to see. James, maybe Aunt Reese needs a minute to breathe before the dinosaur lecture, Marcus suggested, appearing in the doorway. No, it's okay, Reese said, surprising herself. I want to hear about velociraptors. James's face lit up like she'd offered him the moon. Really, because I have charts and pictures and very important facts about how they hunted in packs. For the next 45 minutes, Reese sat on the living room floor while James delivered his presentation with the gravitas of a university professor. His facts were indeed dubious. Velociraptors were definitely not the size of school buses and probably couldn't talk to each other with mind powers, but his enthusiasm was infectious. Connor contributed by occasionally shouting, roar and stomping around, which James informed everyone was emotionally accurate but scientifically imprecise. Marcus and Jessica watched from the couch, and Ree could feel them observing her, trying to figure out if this version of her was real or just performance. She didn't blame them. She was trying to figure out the same thing. Lunch was grilled cheese, apparently the universal food of comfort, and tomato soup that Connor mostly wore. James narrated every bite, explaining his exact she-said or bread ratio preferences and why crusts were an important structural element. Do you have kids? James asked suddenly, looking at Ree with those two perceptive 5-year-old eyes. The question landed like a stone. No, I don't. Why not, James? Marcus said gently. What? I'm just asking. It's a normal question. It's okay. Reese sat down her spoon. I guess I've been too busy with work to think about it. That's sad, James announced with devastating honesty. Kids are the best. You're missing out, James, Jessica said more firmly this time. But it's true. Aunt Ree should have kids. Then she could teach them about business, and they could teach her about dinosaurs, and everyone would learn things. Marcus covered his face with his hands. I'm so sorry. He has no filter. He's right, though, Ree said quietly. I am missing out. The afternoon settled into comfortable chaos. They played blocks, which mostly involved Connor destroying whatever James built and James delivering philosophical monologues about the temporary nature of creation. They read books, the same one 4 times, because Connor was deeply attached to a story about a truck. James showed Ree his room, explaining the significance of every toy and poster with the kind of detail usually reserved for museum tours. At one point, while the boys were absorbed in a cartoon, Jessica made tea and sat with Ree at the kitchen table. Marcus told me about your call, she said quietly, about you wanting to reconnect. I think that's really brave. I don't know about brave, more like overdue. Both can be true. Jessica wrapped her hands around her mug. Can I be honest with you? Reese braced herself. Please. I was skeptical when Marcus said you were coming. You've been absent for so long, and I've watched him make excuses for you. Hope you'd show up, be disappointed over and over. Her voice was gentle, but firm. I love my husband, and I don't like watching him hurt, so I'm protective. I understand. But watching you with the boys today, Jessica's expression softened. I don't know what changed or why, but you're trying. Really trying. Not just showing up physically, but actually being present. That matters. I met a 6-year-old on New Year's Eve. Ree said. She asked me what my favorite color was, and I couldn't answer. And I realized I'd spent so long being successful that I'd forgotten to be human. Your husband gave me a chance to remember. So did your kids today. I'm grateful for that. Jessica studied her for a long moment. What is your favorite color? Did you figure it out? Reese thought about it. About Lily's purple dress. About the warm wood tones in Mateo's workshop. About the way sunset looked over Manhattan when she actually took time to notice it. I'm working on it. Getting closer. Good. The boys are going to ask again, probably repeatedly. James is very persistent about these things. Dinner was chaotic and perfect. Pasta that Connor decorated the walls with. James continued dinosaur narration. Marcus telling stories about Reese from childhood that made her laugh and cringe in equal measure. Stories about the sister who'd always been too serious, even at 10, who'd organized her toys by category and color. Who'd announced at 12 that she was going to be CEO of something, anything, and had never wavered from that goal. You were so determined, Marcus said, smiling at the memory. Mum used to joke that you came out of the womb with a business plan. Someone had to be responsible, Reese said. You were too busy being charming and making friends. Still am. It's working out pretty well. Marcus gestured around the table. His wife, his children, the life he'd built on connection instead of conquest. After dinner, bath time became a full-contact sport involving excessive splashing and Connor's insistence that dinosaurs could swim. James recruited Ree to help, which mostly meant holding towels and listening to very important theories about water resistance. You're good at this, Marcus said quietly, finding Reese in the hallway while Jessica wrestled Connor into pajamas. At what? Standing around while your kids recreate the ocean. At being here. At trying. I know it's not natural for you, the whole family chaos thing, but you're doing it anyway. That means something. Reese leaned against the wall, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with work and everything to do with the emotional labor of being present. I don't know what I'm doing. None of us do. That's parenthood. That's family. You just show up and hope you don't break anything too badly. What if I already broke things too badly? 3 years, Marcus. 3 years of choosing everything else over you. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You did break things. I won't pretend you didn't, but broken things can be fixed if people care enough to try. Do you care enough? Yes. The answer came without hesitation. I really do. Bedtime was elaborate. Stories for James, songs for Connor, multiple rounds of just one more hug. When James finally settled, he looked at Ree with sleepy eyes. Are you coming back? He asked. Or is this just one time? The question hit harder than any business negotiation ever had. Reese knelt beside his bed, eye level with this small person who'd welcomed her into his life with zero hesitation despite her complete absence from it until today. I'm coming back, she said. I promise. Promise or grown-up promise. Reese smiled, thinking of Lily and her insistence on real promises versus convenient ones. Promise. Okay, good, because I have more dinosaur facts to tell you, like hundreds more, maybe thousands. I look forward to every single one. After the boys were asleep, the 3 adults collapsed in the living room with wine and the particular exhaustion that came from caring for small humans. They adore you already, Jessica said. James hasn't stopped talking about his aunt who came all the way from New York just to hear about velociraptors. They're remarkable, Reese said. Both of them. You're doing something right. Greater than we're stumbling through it and hoping for the best, Marcus said. But yeah, they're pretty great. He paused. Ree, I have to ask, what happened? What actually changed between New Year's and now? Reese told them everything about standing in Oriol's doorway rejected despite her reservation. About Lily pointing at her across a restaurant and declaring her loneliness unacceptable. About Mateo inviting her to join them. About the fireworks on the Brooklyn Bridge. About holding a child's hand during a countdown and wishing desperately to be less alone. She told them about the terrible cutting board she'd made in Mateo's workshop, about her list of things she actually liked, about the slow, painful process of remembering how to be human instead of just successful. Marcus and Jessica listened without interrupting. And when Ree finished, they sat in silence for a moment. This Mateo, Marcus said carefully. Is he just a friend? Reese interrupted. Someone who's teaching me how to make beautiful things when I'm sad. That's all. Marcus raised an eyebrow, because the way you talk about him. We're friends, Ree insisted. But even as she said it, she wondered if it was true. What was Mateo to her? The carpenter who'd invited a stranger to dinner. The father who'd shown her what connection looked like. The man whose callous hands had gently removed her splinter while teaching her that pain was part of the process. She didn't have language for what he was becoming to her. Didn't have categories for relationships that didn't advance her career or expand her network. Okay, Marcus said, clearly not believing her, but kind enough not to push. Friends, whatever you say. They talked until midnight about everything and nothing. Marcus worked as a financial advisor. Jessica's return to teaching. The boys' various quirks and triumphs. Stories from childhood that Ree had forgotten or never properly appreciated. Plans for future visits, tentative at first, then more concrete as the night wore on. Memorial Day weekend, Marcus said. Come up for the whole weekend. We usually do a cookout. Very casual. The boys would love it. I'll be here. Reese said. Yeah. Marcus looked hopeful. Promise. She spent the night in their guest room, surrounded by Jessica's grandmother's furniture and photos of the boys at various ages. As she lay in bed, she could hear the house settling around her, pipes creaking, the heat kicking on, Marcus and Jessica's quiet conversation from their bedroom. This was what she'd been missing. Not the specific details, the house, the kids, the domestic routine, but the feeling of belonging to something larger than herself, of being part of a family that existed beyond achievement and acquisition. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mateo. "How's Boston? Lily wants to know if your nephews like dinosaurs because apparently that's the measure of a person's worth." Reese smiled and typed back, "Boston is good. My nephew is very into dinosaurs. Lily would approve. She'll be thrilled. Also, she's been working on your surprise all day. I'm not allowed to tell you what it is, but it involves significant glitter." Should I be concerned? Probably, but in a good way. "See you Thursday." "Absolutely. I'm getting better at sanding. We'll see about that." Reese set her phone down and stared at the ceiling, thinking about the strange architecture of the life she was building. Reconnecting with Marcus and his family, learning carpentry from a widowed father who made beautiful things from grief, befriending a 6-year-old who believed in the power of purple dresses and honest questions. None of it made strategic sense. None of it advanced her career or increased her net worth. But all of it made her feel more alive than she'd felt in years. Sunday morning was pancakes and chaos. Connor wearing more syrup than he consumed. James explaining his detailed theories about optimal pancake to syrup ratios. After breakfast, they walked to a nearby playground despite the cold. The boys racing ahead while the adults followed at a more sedate pace. "This was really good," Marcus said as they walked. "Having you here, being able to just be siblings again." "It was," Reese agreed. "I didn't realize how much I'd missed this until I had it back." "You can have it back whenever you want. You just have to keep choosing it." "I know. I'm trying to learn how to choose better." At the playground, James recruited Ree to push him on the swings while Marcus chased Connor around the play structure. Reese pushed her nephew higher and higher while he shrieked with laughter and something in her chest expanded. Joy, maybe. Or just the relief of being part of something that mattered beyond quarterly earnings. When it was time to leave, James hugged her fiercely. "You're coming back, right? You promised." "I'm coming back. Memorial Day weekend." "That's a promise. Good, because I'm going to have so many more dinosaur facts by then. Like probably 1,000,000. Connor, not quite understanding what was happening, but sensing the emotion, hugged her legs and said, "Boom," very seriously, which everyone agreed was his way of saying goodbye. Marcus drove her to the station and they sat in the car for a few minutes before she had to catch her train. "Thank you," Reese said. "For giving me another chance, for letting me meet your boys, for not giving up on me even when I gave you every reason to." "You're my sister," Marcus said simply. "I was angry. Yeah, hurt. But I never stopped wanting you in our lives. I'm glad you finally wanted in, too." "Me, too." They hugged goodbye, and this time it was easier, less awkward, more like family. On the train back to New York, Ree looked at the photos Jessica had insisted on taking. Reese with the boys, Ree and Marcus, the whole family together. In them, she looked different, softer, present, like a person who belonged to something beyond her empire. She sent one to Mateo, "My family. First visit in 3 years." It was scary and perfect. His response came quickly. "They look great. You look happy. Turns out being brave suits you." Lily was right. Easy brave isn't real brave. She's 6 and wiser than most adults. "Are you ready for Thursday?" "I'm teaching you joinery. It's hard." "Good. I'm tired of easy things." "That's the spirit." Fair warning. Lily is planning a whole presentation for her surprise. It's apparently very important and involves a speech. Of course it does. Reese smiled and put her phone away, watching the landscape blur past. Boston giving way to Providence, Providence to Connecticut, the miles carrying her back toward Manhattan and the life she was slowly, deliberately reconstructing. Her phone buzzed with one more text from Lily. "Did you figure out your favorite color yet? It's been 2 weeks. This is taking forever." Reese thought about purple dresses and warm wood and her nephew's laughter. Thought about the way sunset looked over the Brooklyn Bridge. About the purple pink of her nephew's construction paper artwork. About the deep blue of Mateo's workshop walls. She typed, "Getting close. I'll tell you Thursday when I see you finally. Daddy said you were taking it seriously, but I thought maybe you forgot because grown-ups forget important things. Sometimes I didn't forget. Some things are worth taking time to get right." "That's very wise. Maybe you're learning." Reese laughed out loud, earning curious looks from other passengers. A 6-year-old thought she was learning. That felt like progress. The train pulled into Penn Station as evening fell, the city lighting up around her. Reese walked through the station with her weekend bag and her heart feeling fuller than it had in years. She had family who wanted her present. She had nephews who thought she was worth getting excited about. She had a terrible cutting board that proved she could make things with her own hands. She had a favorite color, or at least she was getting close to knowing what it was. She had a life that was slowly, painfully becoming more than just successful. One beautiful thing at a time. Thursday arrived with unexpected sunshine, the kind of late January morning that felt like a promise the city might not keep. Reese left her office at noon, scandalizing her assistant by blocking out the entire afternoon again, and took the subway to Gowner's with her terrible cutting board wrapped carefully in her bag. She'd been practicing her surprised face all week as instructed. Mateo's workshop door was propped open despite the cold, and she could hear voices inside before she even knocked. Lily's high-pitched excitement, Mateo's lower rumble, and what sounded like heated debate about glitter placement. "I'm telling you, Daddy, more glitter is always better than less glitter. That's just science." "That's not science, sweetheart. That's your opinion." "My opinion is science." Reese stepped inside to find Lily standing on a stool at the workbench, covered head to toe in what appeared to be purple glitter. Mateo stood beside her, also glittered, holding what looked like a small wooden box with elaborate hinges. Lily spotted her immediately and jumped off the stool with zero concern for safety. "You're here. Don't look at the surprise yet. Close your eyes." "Lily, let her come in the door first," Mateo said, but he was smiling. "Hey, how was Boston?" "Really good. Better than I expected." Reese closed her eyes obediently, hearing Lily's footsteps racing around the workshop. "Okay, you can open 'em now, but you have to act surprised. Those are the rules." Reese opened her eyes to find Lily holding a small wooden heart about the size of her palm painted in the most vibrant purple she'd ever seen. It was covered in glitter of course and had recarved into it in careful if slightly wobbly letters. "I made this for you," Lily announced proudly. "Daddy helped with the carving because knives are dangerous and I'm only 6, but I did all the painting and the glitter. It's purple because that's my favorite color. But Daddy says you can paint it your favorite color when you figure out what it is. But you have to keep it forever, no matter what color it is." Reese took the heart with hands that weren't quite steady. The wood was smooth under her fingers. The purple paint slightly uneven in the way that proved small hands had applied it with great concentration. The glitter caught the light, making the whole thing sparkle like something precious. "It's beautiful," she said, and her voice cracked on the words. "Are you crying?" Lily peered up at her with concern. "Happy crying or sad crying?" "Happy crying. Very happy crying." Reese knelt down to Lily's level. "This is the most beautiful thing anyone's ever given me." "Thank you." "You're welcome. Now you have something to remind you that you're not alone anymore. See, the heart is you and the purple is me. And even when we're not together, you can hold it and remember." Lily threw her arms around Reese's neck. "That's what Daddy's flowers do for me. Now you have your own remembering thing." Reese hugged her back. This small, fierce human who decided she was worth saving and had followed through with determination and glitter. Over Lily's shoulder, she could see Mateo watching them, his expression soft and knowing. "What do you say we get to work?" Mateo said after Lily finally released her. "I promise to teach you joinery, which is going to make your cutting board look like a masterpiece by comparison." "Can I help?" Lily asked. "You can be quality control again, but maybe less glitter this time. We're working with actual client pieces." "Fine, but I still think more glitter would improve everything." They spent the afternoon in the workshop, Mateo teaching Reese the basics of dovetail joints, while Lily provided commentary and occasional inspections. It was harder than sanding, requiring precision and patience. Reese wasn't sure she possessed. Her first attempt was catastrophic. The joint so loose it fell apart immediately. "That's normal," Mateo said, examining her work. "Joinery is all about patience, getting the angles exactly right, understanding that small mistakes compound into big problems." "Sounds like business," Reese muttered, trying again. "Sounds like everything worth doing." He adjusted her grip on the chisel, his hand warm over hers. "Here, feel the resistance. That's the wood telling you you're going too fast. Listen to it." Reese focused on the sensation, the give and push of the wood under the blade, the way the grain directed the cut. It was meditative in a way her high-stakes negotiations never were. There was no room for multitasking, no space for her mind to race ahead to the next crisis. Just this moment, this cut, this piece of wood. Better, Matteo said when she finished the cut. See, you're learning. I'm a terrible student. You're an impatient student. That's different. You want to be good at it immediately, but carpentry doesn't work that way. It requires you to be bad at it for a while first. I hate being bad at things. I know, that's why it's good for you. He smiled. Being comfortable with incompetence is a useful skill. Keeps you humble, keeps you trying. Lily appeared at Reese's elbow, squinting seriously at the joint. It's better than before, but still kind of wonky. Keep practicing. Daddy says practice is how you get from terrible to okay. Just okay, Reese asked. Okay is good. Okay is better than terrible. Daddy says okay is where most people stop, but great is where you get if you keep going past okay. Lily patted her arm encouragingly. You'll get there. You're very determined. That's your superpower. They worked until the light started to fade. Reese's hands cramping from the unfamiliar motions. She'd managed to create two joints that didn't completely fall apart. Progress, Matteo assured her, though they were still far from functional. You should come for dinner, Matteo said as they were cleaning up. Lily's been asking all week. And I make a mean spaghetti carbonara. With bacon, Lily interjected. Real bacon, not that fake stuff. With real bacon and peas before you complain. I always complain about peas. Peas are an insult to food. Reese laughed, some of the tension from the day's work releasing. I'd love to come to dinner. They walked back to Matteo's apartment together, Lily between them, holding both their hands and narrating everything they passed, the bodega with the cat in the window, the house with the interesting fence, the tree that she'd decided was magic because it had a branch that looked like a dragon. At the apartment, Matteo cooked while Lily set the table with great ceremony, explaining to Ree the exact placement requirements for each utensil. Ree sat at the small kitchen table and watched them move around each other with the practiced choreography of people who'd learned to be a team of two. You're different than you were on New Year's, Matteo said, stirring the pasta. More relaxed, less like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. I visited my brother last weekend, met my nephews for the first time, really met them, not just appeared at a wedding and left. They're remarkable. James is obsessed with dinosaurs and Connor thinks everything should go boom. Sounds age appropriate. Matteo tasted the sauce, added more pepper. How'd it feel reconnecting? Terrifying. Wonderful. Both at once. Reese accepted the glass of wine he poured for her. My nephew asked me if I was coming back or if it was just one time, and I promised him I would. Promise. Promise. Not grown-up promise. Lily looked up from her table setting. That's my thing. Did you teach him my thing? He actually taught it to me first. Apparently, children universally understand the difference between real promises and convenient ones. That's because grown-ups lie a lot, Lily said matter-of-factly. Not mean lying, just saying things they don't mean because it's easier. Daddy never does that, though. He says if you're going to say something, you should mean it all the way. Your daddy's a smart man. I know, that's why I keep him. Dinner was chaotic and perfect, just like everything seemed to be with Lily involved. She told elaborate stories about her day at school, critiqued the pedestal ratio with the seriousness of a food critic, and asked Ree approximately 1,000 questions about everything from her favorite animal to whether she believed in magic. I'm starting to, Ree said when Lily asked the magic question. I didn't used to, but I'm starting to think maybe there's magic in regular things, like how you can turn a piece of wood into something beautiful, or how people can go from strangers to friends in one dinner. Lily nodded sagely. That's the best kind of magic, the kind that looks normal but isn't. After dinner, after Lily was bathed and pajamed and storied into bed, Matteo and Ree sat on his handmade couch with tea and the comfortable silence of people who'd moved past the need to fill every moment with words. Can I ask you something? Matteo said finally. Sure. What are you going to do with all this? The carpentry, the reconnecting with family, the life you're building outside of work. Is it sustainable or is it just a phase before you go back to being the ruthless CEO everyone knows? Reese considered the question seriously. A month ago, she would have said it was temporary, a brief moment of crisis before returning to normal. Now she wasn't sure what normal was anymore. I don't know, she admitted. I'm making it up as I go. But I know I don't want to go back to what I was before. The woman who couldn't get a table at a restaurant on New Year's Eve because she had no one to share it with. The woman who didn't know her favorite color. The woman who was so busy being successful she forgot to be human. So what do you want to be instead? Someone who shows up for family, for friends, for life. Someone who makes beautiful things even when she's sad. Someone who she paused searching for the right words. Someone who takes up space. Real space, not just corporate boardroom space. Mateo smiled. Lily would approve of that answer. She has very strong opinions about taking up space. She has very strong opinions about everything. That she does. It's exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. He sat down his tea. For what it's worth, I think you're doing it. The changing thing. I've watched you these past few weeks, and you're not the same person who sat at our table on New Year's Eve looking like the loneliest person in the world. What do I look like now? Like someone who's figuring out what she wants her life to mean beyond her job title. He met her eyes, like someone who's learning that success and happiness aren't the same thing, and happiness might actually matter more. The words settled between them, heavy with truth. Reese thought about her penthouse, about the empire she'd built that had started to feel more like a prison than an achievement. Thought about Catherine at lunch, asking if success and happiness were the same thing. Thought about standing in this small Brooklyn apartment that radiated warmth and connection and wondering why she'd ever thought square footage mattered more than this feeling. I need to tell you something, she said suddenly, and I don't know how to say it without it sounding crazy. Mateo waited, patient. You and Lily, you saved my life. Not metaphorically, actually. I was standing in that restaurant on New Year's Eve thinking about how empty everything was. And Lily pointed at me and decided I mattered. And you invited me to your table even though I was a complete stranger. And you both kept inviting me back, kept teaching me, kept showing me what connection looks like. Her voice cracked. I don't know how to thank you for that, for seeing me when I'd become invisible to myself. Raise. Mateo's voice was gentle. You don't have to thank us. Lily invited you because she has a pathological need to fix sad things. And I said yes because I saw something in you that recognized something in me. We were both lonely in different ways. We helped each other. How did I help you? You reminded me that grief doesn't have to be the only thing defining me. That I can let new people in without betraying Sarah's memory. That moving forward isn't the same as leaving behind. He smiled, sad and fond at once. Lily loved you immediately, and watching her love someone new reminded me that our family doesn't have to stay frozen the way it was. It can grow, change, include new people. They sat in silence for a moment, both of them processing the weight of what they'd said. Then Mateo reached over and took her hand, and the gesture was so simple and so significant that Ree felt tears prick her eyes. I figured out my favorite color, she said. Yeah, it's not one color. It's all of them. Purple like Lily's dress. The warm brown of wood in your workshop. The gold of sunset over the Brooklyn Bridge. The blue of my nephew's eyes. She squeezed his hand. I spent so long trying to pick one thing, trying to be decisive and certain like I am in business. But life isn't business. Life gets to be complicated and contradictory and full of color. Mateo smiled. Lily is going to have opinions about that answer. I'm sure she will, but it's the truth. When Ree finally left that night, Lily's purple glitter heart tucked safely in her bag alongside her terrible cutting board. She felt different, lighter, like she'd been carrying weight she didn't realize she had until she set it down. On the subway home, she pulled out her phone and opened her document. Things I actually like. She read through her list, now up to 23 items, and added 3 more. The sound of Lily's laugh when she's told she's right about something. The smell of Mateo's workshop. The feeling of making something with your hands, even when it's imperfect. Then she opened her email and did something she'd never done in 20 years of building her empire. She wrote to her board of directors and proposed reducing her role. Not leaving entirely. She'd built this company. She still cared about it, but stepping back, delegating more, making space in her life for things that couldn't be quantified in quarterly reports. She wrote to Catherine asking if they could meet for lunch, real lunch, not business lunch, the kind where they talked about their lives instead of their portfolios. She wrote to Marcus confirming Memorial Day weekend and asking if she could come up more often, maybe once a month. Maybe she could actually get to know her nephews, watch them grow up, be the aunt she should have been all along. She sent the emails before she could second-guess herself. Each one a small revolution against the life she'd built that had stopped fitting. The next morning, Ree woke early out of habit, but didn't immediately reach for her laptop. Instead, she made coffee and sat at her dining table, where her terrible cutting board now lived as a permanent centerpiece, and thought about what she actually wanted, not what would make her more successful or more powerful or more respected. What would make her happy? What would make her life feel full instead of empty? Her phone rang. Her assistant. "The board responded to your email," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "They want an emergency meeting today." "Of course they do." Reese took a sip of her coffee. "Schedule it for this afternoon. I have something to do this morning." What could possibly be more important than personal time? "Remember, we talked about this." After she hung up, Reese got dressed and took the subway to Brooklyn. She showed up at Matteo's workshop unannounced, finding him already at work on a dining table that was slowly taking shape under his hands. "This is a surprise," he said when he saw her. "Good surprise, but surprise nonetheless. I sent an email to my board last night. Told them I'm stepping back. Not leaving, but delegating, making space for other things." Matteo set down his tools. "How do you feel about that?" Terrified, relieved, both at once. She moved closer to the table he was working on, running her hand along the smooth grain. "I've spent 20 years building this career, this reputation, and it mattered. It still matters. But it can't be the only thing that matters anymore. What are you going to do with all that space you're creating?" "I don't know yet. Learn more carpentry. Visit my family more often. Maybe mentor young women trying to break into venture capital, help them do it without sacrificing everything else the way I did." She smiled. "Figure out what makes me happy instead of just what makes me successful." That sounds like a good plan. It's terrifying. The best plans usually are. Matteo pulled out a stool for her. "Want to help? I could use another set of hands on this table leg." They worked together in comfortable silence. Matteo teaching and Reese learning, both of them building something real with their hands. Around noon, Lily arrived from school early dismissal day and immediately demanded updates on Reese's color situation. "I figured it out," Ree announced. "My favorite color is all of them." Lily's nose wrinkled. "That's cheating." "It's not cheating, it's honest. I like different colors for different reasons. Purple for dresses and glitter, brown for wood and warmth, blue for eyes and sky. I don't have to pick just one." Lily considered this seriously. "Okay, I'll allow it, but you have to pick one color for your heart. You can't paint it rainbow. That's too much. What do you think I should paint it? What color makes you happiest?" Reese thought about it. About purple dresses and spontaneous invitations, about a little girl who'd decided loneliness was unacceptable and had done something about it. "Purple, definitely purple." Lily beamed. "Good choice. That's my favorite, too. Now we match." The board meeting that afternoon was exactly as combative as Ree expected. They questioned her judgment, her commitment, her ability to lead if she wasn't going all in. She listened to their concerns and then delivered the speech she'd been preparing all morning. "For 20 years, I've given this company everything, every waking hour, every ounce of energy, every piece of myself. And we've built something incredible together. But sustainable success requires sustainable leadership, and I haven't been sustainable. I've been burning out slowly for years, and I didn't realize it until I almost burned down to nothing." She looked around the conference table at faces that had become too familiar, at people who knew her resume, but not her. "I'm not leaving. I'm recalibrating, creating structure that allows me to lead effectively while also having a life outside these walls. If that's not acceptable to this board, then perhaps we need to discuss succession planning. But I'm not negotiating on this. My decision is final." The room was silent for a long moment. Then Janet, the CFO, who'd been with the company almost as long as Ree, spoke up about damn time. Everyone turned to stare at her. "What?" Janet shrugged. "We've all watched Ree work herself to death for 2 decades. If she's finally figured out that life exists outside quarterly earnings, I'm not going to fight her on it. I'm going to support it. And if anyone here has a problem with that, maybe you should examine your own work-life balance instead of judging hers." Other heads nodded around the table slowly at first, then with more conviction. These people weren't just colleagues. Some of them were friends. Or as close to friends as Ree had allowed anyone to be. And they'd watched her disappear into her work year after year, probably wondering when she'd realize the cost. "We support you," Janet said firmly. "Make the changes you need to make. We'll figure out the rest." After the meeting, Ree sat alone in her office and cried. Not sad tears, relief tears. The tears of someone who'd been carrying an impossible weight. And finally had permission to set it down. She called Marcus. I did it, she said when he answered. I told my board I'm stepping back, creating actual space in my life for things that matter. Cree, that's incredible. I'm proud of you. I'm terrified. Of course you are. You're changing the entire architecture of your life. Terror is appropriate. She could hear the smile in his voice. But you're doing it anyway. That's what matters. I keep thinking about what James asked me about coming back. And I realized I want to be the kind of person who keeps showing up for you, for the boys, for the life I almost lost while building my career. You're already that person. You're just finally letting yourself be her. That night, Reese sat at her dining table, the one that had never hosted a meal before she'd started eating grilled cheese with strangers, and wrote out her new life in careful detail. Not a strategic plan, not a business proposal, just a list of intentions. Visit Marcus once a month. Learn enough carpentry to make something actually functional. Mentor young women in business. Take Thursdays off for personal time. Say yes to dinner invitations. Figure out what brings joy instead of just what brings success. Be brave enough to be imperfect. Take up space. Let people in. At the bottom, she added, remember that loneliness isn't inevitable. Connection is a choice and you're choosing it now. Her phone buzzed with a photo from Mateo. Lily asleep in her bed, one hand on her carved flowers, the other clutching a purple-painted wooden heart that matched the one Ree had been given. The text said, she made herself a matching one. Said you two are connected now, even when you're apart. I tried to explain that's not exactly how it works, but she was very insistent. Reese smiled and typed back, she's right. That's exactly how it works. She usually is. Are you okay? You seemed emotional earlier. I'm better than okay. I'm figuring out who I want to be when I'm not being a CEO. It's scary and wonderful. Welcome to being human. It's terrifying and nobody knows what they're doing, but we're all doing it together. Thank you for everything. For seeing me. For teaching me. For being patient while I learned. You taught me things, too. About letting people in. About family being something you can build, not just something you're born with. About second chances. Ree sat down her phone and looked around her penthouse. It still felt too big, too empty, too much like a museum and not enough like a home. But it felt different now, like a space waiting to be filled instead of a tomb she'd built around herself. She thought about Lily's question from that first night. Why are you all alone? She wasn't anymore. She had a brother who answered her calls and nephews who demanded dinosaur facts and promises. She had a carpenter friend who taught her that imperfection could be beautiful and a 6-year-old who decided she was worth saving. She had colleagues who'd supported her choice to choose life over work. She had a terrible cutting board and a glitter-covered purple heart and a growing list of things she actually liked. She had a favorite color, all of them, which Lily had grudgingly accepted as valid, even if it was cheating. She had a life that was finally, slowly becoming more than just successful. The next Thursday, Ree showed up at the workshop with paint, purple, obviously, and carefully painted her wooden heart while Lily supervised with the intensity of a museum curator. More glitter, Lily insisted. You always want more glitter because more glitter is always the right answer. That's science. Still not science, sweetheart, Mateo called from across the workshop where he was teaching a joinery class to 3 other students he'd recently taken on. Reese painted and glittered and listened to Lily's commentary about proper purple saturation. And she thought about how strange it was that this sitting in a dusty workshop in Brooklyn covered in paint and glitter being bossed around by a 6-year-old felt more like success than any board meeting ever had. When she finished, Lily held up both hearts side by side, examining them critically. They match, she announced with satisfaction. Now you're stuck with us forever. That's the rule of matching hearts. I can live with that rule, Reese said. Good, because I already told my whole class about you, and they want to meet you, and you can't disappoint first graders. That's probably illegal. Mateo appeared beside them, looking at the matching hearts with a soft expression. You two are quite the pair. We're not a pair. We're a team, Lily corrected. Teams are bigger than pairs. Teams can have more people like you, Daddy. And Aunt Reese's brother and her nephews and eventually more people because we're still collecting them. Collecting them? Reese asked. People who need to not be lonely. That's our job now. We fix sad people by making them not alone anymore. Lily said this with the absolute certainty of someone who discovered her life's calling at age 6. Later, after Lily had been picked up by her friend's mum for a play date, Matteo and Reese sat on the workshop floor with coffee and comfortable silence. "She's decided you're family," Matteo said. "Fair warning, there's no backing out now. Once Lily claims you, you're claimed forever." "I don't want to back out." Retraced the edge of her purple heart. "I want to keep showing up, keep learning, keep being part of this strange little family we're building." It is strange, isn't it? A billionaire CEO, a broke carpenter, and a 6-year-old with no filter. The strangest and the best thing that's happened to me in years. They sat together watching sawdust drift through afternoon light. Two people who'd been lonely in different ways, learning that connection was always possible if you were brave enough to reach for it. Months later on Memorial Day weekend, Reese stood in Marcus' backyard watching her nephews play while Matteo helped Marcus man the grill and Lily explained her very important theories about hot dogs to Jessica. The yard was full of people, Marcus' neighbors, Jessica's teaching colleagues, friends Reese was slowly getting to know as herself rather than as her reputation. "You look happy," Catherine said, appearing beside her with a beer. Catherine had become a regular lunch companion, both of them learning to talk about life instead of just business. "I am happy," Reese said and realized it was true. Not the absence of sadness, she still had hard days, still struggled with stepping back from work, still felt the pull of old habits, but genuine, complicated, real happiness that came from being connected to people who knew her as more than just successful. "Your nephews are adorable. James has been explaining dinosaurs to me for 20 minutes. I now know more about velociraptors than I ever needed to. That's the James experience. You'll be tested later." They stood together watching the chaos of a family cookout. Kids running wild, adults laughing, food burning slightly on the grill while everyone pretended not to notice. Messy and imperfect and exactly right. Lily appeared at Reese's elbow, purple dress slightly grass-stained, holding both their purple hearts. "I brought these," she announced, "because it's important to remember. You were sad and alone and now you're happy and with people. That's growth." Mrs. Chen says recognizing growth is important. Mrs. Chen is very wise. She is. Also, she says you should come talk to my class about being successful without being sad. She thinks that's an important lesson. Reese looked at this small human who'd changed her entire life by pointing across a restaurant and declaring loneliness unacceptable. Who taught her that connection was always possible if you were brave enough to reach for it? Who'd shown her that family was something you build with intention and glitter and purple hearts? "I'd be honored to talk to your class," she said. "Good. I already told them you were coming in 2 weeks. I wrote it on your calendar." "You wrote it on my calendar. I borrowed your phone when you weren't looking. It's fine. You needed more non-work things on there anyway. Now you have talked to Lily's class about not being sad right between your meetings." Matteo joined them, shaking his head with fond exasperation. "Lily Rose Brooks, did you steal Reese's phone again?" "I didn't steal it. I borrowed it for calendar purposes, which is basically administrative assistance." "You're 6. Age is just a number, Daddy. Competence is what matters." Reese laughed and scooped Lily up, spinning her around while she shrieked with delight. When she sat her down, Lily hugged her fiercely. "I'm glad I found you," Lily said seriously. "On New Year's Eve, when you were sad and alone, I'm glad I made Daddy invite you to dinner. You're much better not lonely." "I'm glad you found me, too," Reese said and meant it with her whole heart. "You saved my life. You know that." "I know. That's kind of my thing, saving sad people with dinner and determination." Lily grinned. "But you did the hard part. You showed up. You kept showing up. That's the bravest thing." Later, as the sun set over Marcus' backyard and the cookout shifted into that golden hour where everything felt possible, Reese stood with her purple heart in one hand and a beer in the other, surrounded by people who'd become her family through choice and effort and showing up. She thought about that night on New Year's Eve, standing alone in a restaurant doorway, facing another midnight by herself. Thought about how a little girl's observation had cracked open her carefully constructed life and let the light in. She thought about her terrible cutting board still sitting on her dining table, about Thursday afternoons in a dusty workshop, about learning that imperfection could be beautiful and that trying mattered more than succeeding. She thought about her list of things she actually liked, now over 50 items long and growing every week. She thought about her favorite color, all of them, but especially purple. And she realized that somewhere between New Year's Eve and now, between loneliness and connection, between success and happiness, she'd become someone new, not perfect, not completely transformed, but human, present, alive in ways that had nothing to do with her net worth or her business acumen. Someone who took up space, who let people in, who made beautiful things even when she was sad, who kept showing up because showing up was the bravest thing. Someone who'd learned that the opposite of loneliness wasn't company. It was connection. And connection was always possible if you were brave enough to accept an invitation from a stranger, humble enough to learn from a 6-year-old, and honest enough to admit you'd been building the wrong kind of empire all along. Matteo appeared beside her, his shoulder warm against hers. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How different everything is from 6 months ago. How I almost missed all of this because I was too busy being successful to notice I was dying inside. But you didn't miss it. You're here now. That's what matters. I'm here now," Ree repeated and let herself lean into him, into this moment, into the life she was building, one beautiful thing at a time. Lily ran past, chasing James. Both of them shrieking about dinosaurs and hot dogs in equal measure. Marcus caught Reese's eye from across the yard and smiled, raising his beer in a silent toast. Jessica laughed at something Catherine said. Connor shouted, "Boom!" for no apparent reason except the joy of making noise, and Reese stood in the middle of it all, the chaos and the love and the beautiful imperfection of people choosing to be together, and felt something she hadn't felt in longer than she could remember. She felt like she belonged, not because of what she'd achieved or how much money she'd made or how many companies she'd turned around, but because she'd shown up. Because she'd been brave enough to accept help from strangers. Because she'd learned that taking up space meant making room for others in your life and letting them make room for you and theirs. Because a little girl in a purple dress had pointed at her across a crowded restaurant and decided she mattered. And because Ree had finally bravely believed her, the sun set over Brooklyn, painting the sky in colors that didn't need names, purple and gold and blue and every shade in between. Reese held her glitter-covered purple heart and watched the light fade into evening, surrounded by the family she'd built with intention and effort and showing up one beautiful thing at a time until her life was finally wonderfully hey.